No
Yeah, so
worries.
we're refreshing. I
All
didn't
good.
want to like say over the stream because in case we were, I didn't want to look like it,
Right. Well, at
you
least I got my
know.
practice in. Well, I think we are technically live at this point. I see it kicking off. Welcome everybody to the stream. This is take two. We had some technical difficulties, so a couple minutes late. Apologies about that. But welcome everybody. This is intended to be a Guild War tier list ranking, and so let me get up a little information here for you all. So I'm here alongside of several members of VIP, and the first of many, hopefully, kind of a podcast style discussion. We're going to be focusing on tier rankings across a variety of different things in the game. We're starting today more generally at Guild War tier rankings, and wanted to talk a little bit about who the target audience is and what we mean by some of the rankings. So just kicking things off, the overall ranking definitions in terms of SS down to the other grades. SS would be one of the best in almost all universal conditions. So obviously, when you talk about Guild Wars, a lot of things come into play here in terms of the map and some specific strategies and map buffs, and we're kind of ignoring that for the moment, speaking more generally. So this will apply to the majority of gameplay, obviously not for everything though, but this is what you can expect the SS to be one of the best in almost all of those universal conditions. The S tier, some of the best, but a few caveats by maybe not so universal. A would be really good, but has some exploitable flaws. B would be good, but unfortunately won't get you very far. And then C would be relatively lackluster but usable. And we're not even going to go so far as D and F. And I would imagine there's probably a bunch of characters that are probably C tier by our category that we probably might leave off as well, just because there's so many of them. But overall, I think this is a relatively decent grading system, and we are aiming to kind of talk more generally about kind of the top 50 guilds as sort of the audience we're expecting in terms of level of play. And so, while sure you might have a A or B tier rated comp, and you're beating a comp that we rate as SS tier, very well could be just more related to them not properly tuning the AI or having the equipment you really would expect. So when we're talking about these rankings, it really is from the perspective of really trying to min max them to a relatively common degree in what you'd expect in the top 25 or top 50 guilds. So that being said, I am joined here by several of our members here, and I will go one by one, kind of have them introduce themselves. We'll start with Draste, if you want to say hello to the stream.
Hey, everybody. So I've been with the guild for about 8 or 9 months now, and I think this is really exciting and fun because it's one of the reasons why we keep doing this and want to play is to just try out new things and see what works together because whether it's something from a collab or just original, getting to tinker and build and experiment and see what works, what doesn't, why, and how we can control it all is really the foundation for what keeps so many of us going and keeps us interested. So I think this is always really a great platform to explore different ideas and see, why certain strategies work better or worse with different tools and things that we have at our disposal.
Totally. Thank you for that. I don't know if Hisoka wants to introduce themselves or if they're just here to lurk. But in the instance that they are, I know Argalia, you're also here. If you wanted to say anything, feel free to speak up, either of you. But I also know Nurgent and Quistis are here too.
Sure, I'll tune in. Argali here. I've been a part of Visipore since December late of last year. It's been a pleasure ever since. My focus, more so when it comes to mocking, whenever I do get a chance, is what I like to lovingly call extreme strategy. Most recently, I've been known to run Garvall on the most recent dark map. Just kind of put things together and kind of do a cutesy way of it, messing with the dark, experiencing what it's like to embrace the darkness and cast away the light, so it were. Um, but aside from that, lightning is typically my forte. When it comes to mocking, I was definitely a great advocate of Ibarra and hoping Renan would have some sort of an impact with lightning, much to my chagrin, where just no. But yeah, that's what I'm gonna try to bring to the table is bringing up alpha units to make Quistis, Trace, and Nurgent and Will cringe, while also trying to bring to light as to why those units may or may not work in a PvP setting. So again, Argalia, just me, just me.
Love
That's
it.
that's my bit, and I'm sticking to it.
Right on. Well, thanks so much for that. I'll keep moving along here. Nurgent, if you want to say hi and introduce yourself as well.
Hello, I'm Nurgent. I've been in Visipore since December of 2020. Previous was in the old Guild of Eden. Um, just I love this game, this guild. It's about the the strategy, the mocking, figuring out the comps, trying to get better, and keep coming back. We've had many conversations about keep coming back to old units and figuring out units that people threw in the trash, but especially in this current meta, that we use and actually come out really well. Some of the comps we've had over the years have been very interesting, but I like working with a team of people who we try and figure things out and really fine tune things. And there's always that, that one little more thing to do to make this game better. And to me, that's one of the fun parts of it. Yeah, you're collecting units and doing leveling up and building stuff, which is also fun. But I think the extreme strategy part of it is really where it's at.
Definitely gets the juices flowing, being able to kind of think outside the box and recall things you might not have otherwise.
Yeah.
So excellent. And then last but not least, the leader of VIP, Quistis, if you want to say hello again and a little bit about yourself and whatever you want.
Sure. I guess the real quick short story is I joined in August, and I am basically chief cat herder and jailer. So overall, I have a bunch of help and support from this cast right here and others as well. And we work together, and I'm glad to be able to sit here and hopefully share some of our insights with you.
Right on, right on. Well, thanks so much. We'll get things kicked off with the tier list ranking. We are going to, essentially, to kind of keep things interesting, go element by element and sort of place which units we think are in certain of the tiers. Now, again, we're not going to put, if you're looking at my screen here, we have a slew of characters, probably upwards of 100, if not more, that we're not going to place all of them here. There will be some left off. If they're left off, you can assume that they're below the C, or maybe some that are the C. You can obviously make the case, too. It's really an art form. But at the very least, we'll go element by element, and anyone that we feel particularly strong about being on any of these rankings will do so. So I think we'll probably start the bar low here, and in honor of the new unit being released this week, Valentine Ildira, do we want to start with the fire element unit, guys? See if anyone fits here on our grid?
Well,
We can break a couple hearts.
Right?
I think it's wonderful. I think people will when they see this unit come out today, we can give our assessment of it, how we see it play out in the meta for PvP or not. But yeah, I think it'd be a great start.
All right. Well, our general list here, if I had to kind of kick things off, I would imagine this is like the most, I'll bring it up, why not, most controversial character. Cetia, notoriously high on a lot of the JP rankings. One that a lot of people have wanted to try to fit in, given that she's got so much synergy with some of the newer vision cards and espers. Cetia herself, what are we thinking in general for her?
I'll go A.
The list, or
yeah,
you guys kind of want to go off like our thoughts, and I would agree with the A assessment, if not just solely because of where fire is in global as of right now. She's absolutely a great enabler for the proper fire comp, which we've yet to see, in my opinion. She doesn't quite have the vision card support that, well, fire in general doesn't either. But by far, say she were to get the nice accoutrements for her elements, she would definitely see some limelight and some play enabling fire with her imperils and her barrier breaks.
Definitely, I would overall agree with that. Bringing up our definition again, it's really good, but it has some exploitable flaws. AI is fine, but obviously some of her skills requires a lot of AP, and it's really more just a reflection of the element and the vision cards. The vision cards, really more specifically than anything. But going with the fire units in terms of what I think the best to worst would be, relatively speaking, she's probably near the top of that fire element list. But that's not really saying much. Obviously, A is not a good starting point for one of the better units in your cast of elements.
Right. I think it's important to consider, even if it shouldn't necessarily matter, that like being a cost 100 unit, there's a certain level of expectations as to, how universally usable one of those units might be, especially if you consider the difficulty that can come along with getting one of them. And as a ranger, I think it's important to consider that they're not typically, at least as far as we've seen thus far, any heavy hitters or like one of your damage carries in the same way that other units and a lot of those other cost 100s often are, at least if they're not, a tank, the way Joom is. But they bring a lot of utilities, which, like with, Cetia, is things like re-raise removal, healing power down. And so I think a lot of those things can carry over to a lot of different comps, even if she herself has a lot of I would say, limitations on what she's able to do. And now that I would say too that we're not in such an evade heavy meta, at least speaking, the time that we're in right now, I think that she's able to flourish a lot more, not needing to lean so hard specifically into accuracy to land any hits.
Totally great on that point. There's a lot of characters here you're going to see that have some relative improvement as of late, with evasion not being the must-have that it has been the last 6 months. So yeah, we'll keep going through some of the fire element units, and I don't know if you guys can see my screen. I'm talking to the guys in chat in terms of the unit list, or if you want to have your own list separately. But if anybody wants to chime in with a specific unit in particular, by all means, do that. Otherwise, I'll probably just pick ones that I think worth talking about. So, anyone else have any immediate fire units you want to go over, or should I just kind of keep the ball rolling?
I want to bring up Terra, Drace, if you do the honors and speaking the truth of Terra, as you have so in the past, spoken of her gospel and her global buffs to Meltdown. Where would you place her?
I would put her at least in A tier. I would say she's easily the closest thing I think Fire has to any sort of damage carry right now. She's essentially like a super energist, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And any limitations she really has, I think, largely comes down to the element as a whole. So if not personally, I'm leaning towards S, strictly at least within Fire. And I think she builds a lot of different situations, but depending on, I guess, on how you guys feel, either A, I think, would be fair as well.
Yeah, I think it's about right. And honestly, as we go through this, we'll be able to fluctuate people between ranks if we think we're over or under on some of these estimations also.
I think it's more closer to S than it is an A for the things that Drace mentioned. For the fact that Fire's cards, the VCs they have, they're more synergistic for magic users, I think, than they are for, let's say, DPS. You look at all the old cards, they have Ifrit that's really old, it doesn't really do that much. Same thing with, Death Machine, which gives you 20 AoE res. Otherwise, the rest are mainly more magic focused. For example, Omen, which is Terra's card, and we also have FFCC card, the Crystal Chronicles card, which is actually great all around, but it's a magic stat card. Recently re-released FF14 Fire card, it was more for magic.
Yep. The Rain Vision
Rain's
card. Yeah.
The rest, other ones, I mean, the only real good standout physical card would be the Bronchosaurus card. Aside from that, if Rain could tank a little bit better, for physical, I think he'd be top notch, and Fire would be the better spot. But
yeah,
again, for that, I would rank Terra definitely way higher than Sentia, who I think is closer to B for that other reasons I've mentioned. You're in the healing meta. You need to tank. You have a tank, so someone needs to tank as well. Your DPS needs to DPS and kind of carry that load. She can't do that by herself, and Mod isn't going to bring the damage. Not like can't do damage like June, can't do damage like Charlotte, or even Engel sometimes. If you have two people that doesn't do any damage, you're just going to burn skills and you're going to crash your second hit, if anything at all.
Interesting. All right, so I like it. So
I would totally agree with that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Strategy character, and I do want to, in Terra's defense, she also has courage, which is quite the boon. She can take a hit or two and also survive something that would insta-give her, thus allowing her to use Meltdown, which hits evade units very consistently since
right.
it's a sure hit, of course.
Right.
Yeah, so...
all right.
Well, I think it's worth noting, too, that they bumped that up to 6 uses for Global, which gives her a very unique special edge.
Huge.
Extremely so. Yeah.
All right, so let me do this if you don't mind. For various reasons, they both seem to be in debate whether they're equal or one above the other. It seems like Terra's the consensus better one by a slight edge, but let me hold them at A for now. This might be one of those ones where we come back to once we start filling in more of the S tier units, if it makes sense whether or not they still belong there. But I think A is at least like a pretty generous barometer for now.
Sure.
Okay, and then in terms of the other fire units, I'll be honest, looking at them myself, I mean, we have King Mont, we have Classic Lassie, we have Rain. To me, a lot of them have power cut. Minwu obviously is one of the, other supports that come to mind. I don't know if any of them really make this list other than maybe Classic Lassie and King Mont, and even then they're probably in that C range. Anybody have any strong feelings on any of the other fire units so far?
I would maybe put Mont in A and bump Terra up to S, personally.
What do you guys think about Mont in A? Does that seem...
I feel like that's a fair assessment.
And so
Interesting.
if you're thinking about team composition, and I look at Mont and Rain as tanks, um, you're again with cards and fire, you might end up running a magic comp. Um, so the chance of maybe attacking, but again, you don't see much magic in the meta. So I
Well,
guess
no,
if
I
Mont
agree with
is
you.
A tier, what is Rain?
But this is like generally speaking, right? Like, if you
Yeah,
consider we do enter magic metas and can at any
yeah,
time per se, Mon to me that's a pretty big deficiency that he has no protect and shell,
yeah.
that he doesn't have any great magic resistance or innate spirit. Like I think Mon would be a B by our definition, that good but won't get you far, or even C, like relatively lackluster but usable. Like I feel like either one of those theoretically, like at least comparative to when we talk about other tanks, I might be way off on that, but if to put him on the same level as Terra or even a level below her almost seems like disingenuous. That I think the gap between the two of them is pretty far. Am I off on that?
I
I
would
don't
agree
think
with
B
your
would be
assessment.
too harsh, but yeah, either A or B.
I personally am of the feeling that Rain would be my go-to choice for fire in terms of tanks. Mont can serve a purpose, but even with TMRs and TMR runes, it's not quite uh, bandaged properly, as it were, for finely tuned comp.
I would agree with that, and I can't find Rain. Where'd he go? There he is. So I'll.
Lost the
I
down for
think
units.
I saw somebody mention bringing up his second mastery ability,
Yeah.
which I want to say I'm going to check that really quick, but I believe that was one that was pretty decent, but nothing that would dramatically change anything that we were saying.
Mhm.
Let me just see.
And I agree with the overall judgment of Rain. I can't get over his agility stat though. Like I feel like that will always keep
Fair
him
point.
in that C range. Like his kit actually is really good. Decreased movement. He's got some status effects. Got an imperil. Got a multi hit. Like there's a lot that he can do
Whoa.
well. His AP usage is overall pretty good because of what he starts out as. But like the agility is just such a hard hurdle to get over, particularly because Fire does not have a 15% agility card yet. That sure, that's a potential in the future, but until then, I got to put him around that C level too, where, as you said, like relatively lackluster but usable, and even then, that might be debatable.
Yeah, and I was just checking, and so his MA2 is going to be 10% more HP, which is certainly nice, and 10% more all elemental resistance. But as great as those things can be, they don't change anything about his limitations that we were just mentioning.
Right, right. That's true, and he doesn't have a lot
Yeah,
of buffs. If you don't have his hate
yeah,
generating ability on, he's like a one buff pony, which is not ideal.
yeah. I think a skill 25, if it was a more defensive or buff based, um, to help him tank better, I think that would have been better.
Mhm.
But they just made it another damage skill,
Right.
which works for some occasions. But
Right. Yeah, if this is PVE content, Rain would be an S tier. Rain is consistently like one of the best fire units you can bring
yep,
for PVE, but other than that, it's a little more limited. So we'll all right, we'll tentatively keep this here again. We can revise it. I just know we got a lot of elements to get through, so I want to kind of keep things going too. Any strong thoughts on Glassy or any of the other fire units like Summer Ketone, Eld? I'm kind of just glossing over here. Minwoo.
I would at least put her in A, just because she is able to, I
Wait,
would
put
say,
who in
even
it?
do heals better.
Shella.
Really? Okay. All right.
I agree with that. The fact that she's able to bring healing to the table is a huge boon. Even if her AI doesn't lean towards that, for the most part, by far, it's a great boon to the fire element.
Right.
And
And to what we were saying before too, she's a really great, I mean, along with Terra, but especially if you're using both, they synergize extremely well.
Good
And
point.
you can have someone like either one of them use the Rain Vision card, which is just one of those very few really great cards that Fire even has.
Right. And those of you in chat, I also do want to give a special shout out. JB79 happened to join us here. So, JB, for those of you who may or may not know, like one of the like fantastic, what do you want to call it, like manual play, like theory crafting people, even PVE minds that we have here in terms of, you know, what do you call it, guild raids and whatnot. So, thanks for joining, JB. Appreciate you being here. Just figured I'd throw that out there, a little notoriety for anybody who may not be familiar with him yet. So, all right. Sorry for the segue, but okay then. So, fire units. I think we probably covered the majority. Just eyeballing it, the ones we have left off. are Minwu, Lartha, Summer Ketone, and Winter Moshery. Does anyone have any strong feelings on them being on this list?
I forget they exist,
That
especially
yeah,
Summer Zone.
yep. I'm kind of the
The
same way.
one thing I will say is that when we do get the winter MA2s, that does give Moshery some specific things that she really does need, like defense pen. But I don't know if those would necessarily be a dramatic shift,
Mhm.
but they could have niche use for sure.
Definitely. Okay, cool. So we'll currently table this for fire again. We can make adjustments if we need to. But we'll move on to the next one then, and just picking a random element here. We'll do. You want to do ice? That's kind of keep going with the element wheel here.
Ellis has a special place in my heart. Not only is he voiced by Gintoki from Gintama in JP, but he is also what I refer to as the Doctor Doom of War of the Visions. And if anyone's played Marvel 3, that means he can go into any comp and fit in like bacon.
I would agree with
Just
that entirely.
between his haste enabling, his ability to generate AP while healing, which is quite the boon for any comp that is especially resource heavy. Um, by far one of the greatest unit additions across the board that sees playing many different rainbow elements, and the ability for him to have flexibility with vision card utility, especially having the what we refer to as the MILF card in Turkey. That would be Black Rose Helena and Holiday Party, respectively.
Definitely. So, springboarding off that, I'm going to go ahead and put Velas in the SS tier. Would anybody disagree with that here?
Yeah.
And I can go on a little bit about that. From VIP standpoint, before Velas dropped, it was mainly still mono light. We had some wind for counters. We had maybe some, really just wind, I think, to stop mono light. Once we dropped Velas, literally the whole meta shifted. Every other guild started pulling Velas with where they could or changed to where they could. We saw literally how the meta shifted because we threw Velas and we knew he could AoE heal. We brought back units that didn't really see play. For example, Noctis. And we put him with Oberon. That became a meta. That became a wall, a defense for us for a little bit. But we kept tinkering around, and overall it ended up becoming the water meta for a little bit with Astrius. Now we'll have something else now that we have Dark. But overall, yes, a unit that can change the meta definitely would be SS, and it was definitely for us.
Yeah, and I think just to branch off that really quick is that one of the specific changes that it brought that he was just touching on is that we were in such like a heavy one shot type of battle mindset, whereas now it immediately kind of has kind of pivoted back to more about sustain and what we can do to not just prolong fights, but just utilize different assets like status resists and ailments for that matter, and different things at play. Whereas before it was more about like, let's just kill things as fast as possible and or do whatever is possible to even evade those hits rather than survive them.
Absolutely. And honestly, it's kind of crazy when you consider, like, what, a year ago with Final Fantasy X when Unit came out, Sustain was, like, the name of the game. And then how quickly it went from that to the insta-kill potential that you're talking about. Now we're kind of back in that Sustain, how easily one character can do that. And I would agree with everything everyone said. Velas is so well-rounded that Limit Break gives himself a barrier, the AP regeneration, the healing. He's got some fantastic range with his agility. There's really nothing bad about his kit that I can really think of. You can really fine tune his AI to be smart as well. I think very rarely does he make a decision that you go, wow, why did he do that? I disagree with that. Whereas some of the other supports, you could make that case where they miss an enemy or they attack someone they shouldn't, or the healing threshold isn't met, and so they don't heal. But I don't find that to be the case with Velas very often. So definitely SS tier, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, and one distinction I want to bring up as well, really quick, is that I would say the closest thing we maybe had to Velas prior to his release would have been, I wouldn't even say Yuna, though you could draw some interesting comparisons there. It would have been somebody like probably Halloween Leela. But one of the foundational differences in how they behave is that, like, Leela and by extension even Resnick now have a specific 50% and below heal threshold, whereas Velis is above that. So he's going to preemptively be keeping your team alive a lot sooner and longer, which isn't necessarily what you want 100% of the time, but it's definitely, I feel like, much more of a benefit than a drawback.
Mhm.
And even with just like a more recent, CM that we had, you can put him in assault mode and just turn off his heals completely, and he still has like surprising damage and things that he can do to carry himself in other ways.
Well, just real quickly to your point that if he heals someone where preemptively, where in your head you might be like, oh, historically that's not a good move. The fact that he gives everyone the 15 AP really makes up for it. That maybe in the past,
Right.
if you had a healer that purely just heal botted and healed someone up to full that may not have needed it, by giving that extra 15 AP, it essentially makes up for the DPS loss in Velis that you know for a fact those two people that he just healed can probably make up for the damage relatively quickly. So I think that's the real big caveat to all that.
Wonderful passives, wonderful defense, and casting time. So he'll rarely miss a whiff. Let's not forget haste on two people at the same time. His kit's almost perfect. You might as well just give him a re-raise or full life and just call it a day, right? But they drew the line somewhere.
Definitely.
If he had those two, one of even those two items, he would easily be in a tier of his own by far.
For sure, for sure. So, all right, we've talked about Velas enough. I don't think anyone is surprised by that choice. And to be fair, we're probably talking about him so much because I don't know how much of the ice cast you would put in here alongside him. So he's probably taking up the majority of that talking space. Any characters that come to mind? Otherwise, I know a few that I'm kind of peeking at here. Feel free.
I would throw Aranea up.
Definitely.
I'm a huge fan. I would argue for even up into the S tier.
Yeah, I back Nurgent on S tier for Arnea.
Yep, wholeheartedly.
I mean, she's got great luck. When we're fighting light meta, I was able to reliably hit without even use her 100% hit. With her buff, which you typically have her do the job level 25 buff first to get pierce attack a defense pen, so she's got 70 defense pen right off the bat. Her LB she uses a lot. She has even her 100% hit chance skill is punch damage instead of so you even though it's only 165%, it hits hard. And then she's got the single target resistance dive, so I've seen her a lot of times use that on a tank, which helps take it down, as well as I think her best skill equalizer, which is a dispel buff, dispel hate, dispel courage.
Right.
On it.
Totally. She's
One thing with her AI.
Go ahead, Christus. I'm sorry.
No, it's just one thing with her AI. I just didn't like, but I think she could be close to SS without it. She likes to double buff way too much of her level 25. If someone's next to it, she'll buff it twice. It's not like we're used to seeing Esther, where she buffs any ability, anyone that has a group buff that gives you a shield. You'll buff it once, they won't restack it. Arnea, she's going to do it twice, and it kind of infuriates you because she won't bells, or you have to turn it off and run something else. But other than that, if you can kind of get her just to buff that once, wonderful ability.
Totally agreed. I think she's absolutely a product of just a kind of a weak element at the moment. I do think that she's got some weaknesses to be hedged with her magic resistance. Not enough spirit innately, so there's certain metas where I think she can be exploited. But you're right. All the other utility we just mentioned in terms of the dispel and the courage remove and the defense pen, all that and more are reasons why I think she's definitely here in that S tier. Despite the fact that you probably just don't see her that often at the moment, but I really think that's more a reflection of the balance of the game than it is a reflection of the character. So, okay, so we'll keep her there tentatively for now, unless we want to adjust or anyone else has any other specific points.
If I may, with Arane in mind, how do you feel about Gilgamesh Nurgent? Because I feel like you're more in tune with Ice.
I think he tends to hit really strong, but I don't see him in PvP as much because when I try and use him, he tends to die a lot.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. Yeah, his.
So I'll take a different take on that one. I will also put him in S. I think he serves a different purpose from Aranea, but also is good. So this is not me tooting my own horn from the last Quatus quick pick. I basically ran a team with Velas, June. I'm not calling her June. I'm calling her June, and I call him Greg for Gilgamesh. That's just a little play on words. I think it was like top 20 with that comp. So don't see an issue with him. He can work. One of his skills that he does great with is the ability to equip Keenblade. We have started a meta with Keenblade on short maps. He was literally the king pilot of that thing. So I disagree with that assessment, but I think he can be good. He can hit evade, and he won't double buff. So that said, yeah, I will rate him differently. He has his uses. Will he be as good as removing courage or being like less resistant because he's using slash compared to Pierce? No, but I think he'll bring the heat.
I think he brings up a really great point too, and like what Q is saying is that he is able to kind of keep up, I think, a lot with some of the modernizations that we've had when it comes to things like having an imperil and also having a barrier. And so while he isn't necessarily very beginner friendly, I think in terms of knowing how to use him in a lot of different comps, he does have a huge potential and I would say lasting impact for sure.
Okay.
Thing I do see an issue with him is that now with the Astrius and his Armitage or the Crystal Tracer buff, that thing will destroy him. That's a given. But he literally does it to everybody else. Aside from that, and before he launched, I'd say Greg was one of the best slashers that you could have. Removes 3 rays, which basically nullifies a lot of people running Black Rose Helena, TMR, and other units as well, like more the merrier.
And
Interesting.
by far, Kotetsu's hitbox being obscene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we want to throw him in S rank for now, and then adjust if need be. Or is A more appropriate? No. All
I
right.
think either of them. I think the dying, again, it could be done by changing the AI, changing the team comp to keep them back. So that's something that can be built around. So I think that that flaw, you could say that exploitable flaw,
Sure.
can be worked around.
And actually,
So,
can I ask a quick question? Because I actually did not expect Arena and Gilgamesh to be in the S tier. Kind of doing my head count of where I expected everyone to be. Do we want to potentially weight characters a smidge heavier if they're good for macros but more niche for offense? If that makes sense. Like, would you imagine a scenario right now where you're running Arena Gilgamesh, and have we seen that in JPU as part of a defense macro, or do you think that's more skewed for offensive? If you know what I'm saying. Does that have any
No,
bearing?
totally understand. You're right. In terms of walling or putting him on defense, I would not suggest or would wall Tiger Gilgamesh or the other thing. So if that is going to be one of our considerations, yes, he's more of an offensive tool than a defensive one. But he is a really good offensive one if used correctly.
Right. You know what I mean? Like if you have a character that can be used equally well, both offense and defense, they're probably have a little more premium than someone who's more stuck on one or the other. We'll get to that obviously more as this fills out, but I figured throw that out there, some consideration too potentially.
No, of course. Thanks for letting us know. But considering with the units out right now for DPS or tanks or ice, no character except for Velas would be in that category right now.
I would agree. Yeah, looking at the rest of the ice units, I don't know if any of them really stand out to me personally in terms of hitting this ranking. Just a quick list for those: Barrett, Fryevia, like maybe a fringe C, maybe. Like if Rain's there, I could see why Fry would be there.
Yeah,
One thing I
mean,
would venture to go so far as to say, which I think Nurgent might agree with, is putting Nasha in C.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, this is just URs only. I don't have the MRs included.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, special mention Nasha would be a C. I could definitely see a case for that. Just given the landscape of the tankless version of Ice at the moment, by and large. Yeah.
Yeah.
So apologies. I think Fina is the only one I have here that's an MR, and that's only just because of it's an old tier list. But yeah. All right. Special mention Nasha as a C. Fryevia C, or just leave her off entirely.
I mean, she's so niche.
She's
So
been done dirty.
I
Well,
I
think
think
we can
she's
use
simply
Rain.
too outdated. She doesn't. I would say she has the same problems as what we were saying as Mont, but to an even greater severity.
Fair enough. I could see that. And then JB makes up a great point, and she's getting an MA2 this week. What do we think of Sweetheart Salir? I would think she probably has a place on this list somewhere.
Yeah,
I'd say she's a B.
I would argue A with Master Ability 2, but
Yeah.
B would also be a fair assessment.
Okay.
I would
Let's
honestly
B.
actually disagree with that because I, as someone who is a big fan of her as a unit otherwise, would say that her MA2 is actually pretty disappointing. Out of all the things she could have needed or would have really benefited from, getting a little bit more magic and counter reduction down, it wasn't it.
Good point. Good point. Good point.
well, with the Velas meta, her LB does strip all buffs and haste. from the target, and then increases
That is a
with
really good point.
Oh, if only it was
So,
AoE.
Right.
Only it was an
if
AoE.
only.
Yeah.
All right, so
Still a good
Yeah.
OP though, nonetheless.
we'll keep her tentatively at a B for now. And again,
Yeah.
I intend on rearranging this. I also know for the sake of time, we're at that 540 mark and only 2 elements in here, so
Yeah. Next.
figure we'll kind of fine tune some of this as we go and things get more relative. But okay, and real quickly, just before we completely move on from ice, a couple quick hit list names here. What is this? Velric, Victora. I don't think Laswell, Fravia, Agrius, Orin. Anyone have any thoughts on Orin in particular? Probably not. I think most of them are probably that borderline C.
I mean, most
Yeah,
of them sound
Orin
like
had
they're
his-
going to get. Go ahead.
I was gonna say Oron had his time on that one map that one time.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm about to say
gonna-
is that once we do see their master ability 2s come in, we can probably rearrange them, probably move them from C.
Absolutely.
Victoria is going to get a really decent one where she gets basically a one-hit barrage on both fights that she starts in. That would definitely influence things. Same thing with Orion getting his MA2 a little bit. I'm not familiar sure what it is. I don't think it will change the meta, but something's coming for at least for most of these units we're talking about.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a bunch of them that once I get I would like last one with the MA2 I would put up there. Same thing for her. So yeah, okay, we'll reassess when we get there. All right, for now we'll keep going on the element wheel. How about we start with wind next, if you guys want.
One thing I wanted to just add really quick, since
yeah.
somebody mentioned Rosa, is that I feel like her AI is what really holds her back, because her kit on paper is great, but she will overspam her buffs by a great deal, and you have to restrain her and what she's able to do quite a bit in order to make her usable, and her damage is completely negligible. So I think she could be great, but she has too many things that are holding her back. But yeah, otherwise I would say, yeah, please let's go to wind.
I would agree with that entirely. Yeah, good thought on that. Okay, cool. So going to wind. First one that comes to mind, me personally, is Joom. So for placing Joom anywhere here, I would go at. I mean, I would think probably at the S at the general starting point, but could be higher, could be lower.
Agreed.
Again, S.
I like her a little higher because of the agility break by far, especially with how huge that hitbox is.
Okay, so again,
That's just my personal opinion.
all right. I mean, we did.
From my viewpoint, I think she is S. She was one of the units that we saw coming from JP, and she changed the tank meta for a little bit. Other tanks that existed before that was mainly Engelbert, and June kind of blew him out of the water for the fact that she can be a lot more resilient and resistant to, let's say, physical, while having the courage, but while also having a sure hit, which Engel didn't have, while also having that agility break, which kind of came along with it. So, and for us, we did wall her quite a bit. She plays really well with some of the other winners we didn't talk about. Yes, she's definitely an S for me.
I would agree with that. I could see. I mean, she's got relatively few downfalls. Even the magic weakness can be mitigated half decently. She does technically have a physical barrier if you have the opportunity to weave that AI into it. You obviously can't all the time, which is why I think it's probably an S. Where, you know, if we're going back to our definitions here, S is the only difference between S and SS is that SS you can use almost always in all universal conditions, whereas the second one down is maybe some caveats why not universal. And other than that, I do agree she takes relatively little time to get ramped up to full. She's got some great physical bulkiness. She does have the protect and shell that you look for in a tank. I see no reason to be lower than an S at the very least. But yeah.
How do you feel
So
about
if we're looking at cutting some time, I'll suggest the next couple.
Sure.
And you guys can say, so really on wind, the next 3, or I guess 4 units is we use Little Leela, who I think should be S, and Luartha and Moore, I would say probably A, and 2B at a B. And I'll just throw that up there.
I would agree with that.
same?
Yep. I'm pretty okay with that also.
I would be a little bit closer to more being closer to an S, but again, A is fine with me as well. Again, for me and for her and why I rank her as such, she did change the meta. She basically kind of put Starlight Elena back on the back burner with that poison. Same thing with
Engelbert.
for Engelbert.
Actually,
Yeah, I would actually bump more up to S because she does have both re-raise
Right.
and those status ailments on top of having super high accuracy. So she's going to have a
Right.
lot of longevity, no pun intended.
yep.
That
Yep.
regen adds up
Yeah.
quick, as does drain evocation.
Can I throw
Kit for
something
a
kind
90
of
cost.
odd out here? Would it be an egregious sin? Little Leela, is she still an S, or do you think maybe an A? I only say that from the perspective of the arithmetician heals, that I do think, compared to a lot of the other healers at the moment, not having that healing power, and I don't know if her magic stack gets quite nearly as high as some of the others, and then the buffs in particular, her AI, it's like Protect and Shell, and that's kind of really it, right, in terms of ramp up, whereas some of these other supports have other skills where Leela, obviously was overpowering at one point, but maybe less so now. Am I way off in thinking that, or is she an S tier for you guys?
It's hard to place that for me because I think we were recently spoiled by two wonderful healers, the names of Velas and Resnick. If we're just going to judge her and her performance based on those two, yes, she's not an S. She'd be closer to A. But we want to get into a comparison of where, okay, there can only be one S unit and one SS unit. Within the comp for me, I think she would lean closer to S because she's still very manageable. Could you throw Velas in and replace her? You could. Would it work the same? I wouldn't say no, but again, could be preferences for somebody else. But I still think she would still hold that S ranking, and not just purely for the heals. You turn off heals on her, she can still do a lot of damage.
Yep.
Great range.
Yeah, and I feel like we've been having limited guild battle so frequently now that things like cost do matter within the scope of guild battle, and being only 70, it's just so easy to fit her in on top of the type of role that she inhabits.
Yep. I know someone who's running June more Little Leela tomorrow.
Totally. Oh yeah, I mean the magic card synergy of Little Leela and more is fantastic, but that's more of a reflection of the vision cards and whatnot. I figured it was an interesting talking point, but I won't disagree too hard with you guys. I do relatively agree otherwise. And yeah, Winter Loartha, I don't know how much time we want to talk about her or 2B. I think those are adequately placed though, given what they bring. I know Winter Loartha does get beaten up pretty easily sometimes, but her offensive ability and her range can't be understated. Same thing with some of her buffs. Some of her buffs are fantastic. So yeah, I would agree with that.
The only other person I would maybe think of putting on the list would be maybe Tifa, but I don't really know because we haven't used her in a long time.
Yeah, I would struggle to find us. I mean, maybe Tifa would be that fringe C character. Like if Rain is a C, I could see Tifa being a C.
Yeah, I'd put her on C.
Yeah.
If Rain is, then she would be.
Right. What about Ayaka? Any strong thoughts about her?
You did get her
She works great with
MA2.
Zombie.
Yeah. Probably there's a
Great
wonderful
DMR.
comp you can play with her and other things. But again, her having her second MA2, which gives her 2 casts of Limit Break, was very good. But it's kind of we're at a stage where we had Velas. So anything else that we're trying to compare him to, and we can only have 3 units on a team, I can't find a spot for Ayaka. If
Right.
you don't have him, wonderful. I think she'll slide in just fine. I've seen some teams in the top 10 use Ayaka instead of Velas.
All right. So when we have seen teams in the top 10 use Ayaka. If that's the case, she at least warrants a C spot. I think here then, given our grade scale.
Yeah, and we are focusing on things that are out right now, but Wind is going to very soon have Sottily as well. And so they're going to kind of fit into a somewhat similar place, which will make that another decision people will have to really come down on.
I can agree with that. Okay, yeah, and then just kind of eyeballing the remaining Wind units. I don't think we've left anybody off. It's I mean, Varush is good. I don't know if he's maybe a C warranted spot, but really niche to the meta. And then you get Yurma, Oldoa, Corwell, Gargus. I don't really think any of them really hit the needle here.
I'd like to try Yurma just as a sim. That's all I have to say on her.
Yeah, she got shafted by the MA2 there. So okay, all right. So we're pretty okay with Wind here now. We'll keep kind of moving along. I think the next one, probably Earth. If we want to get into it. So I think the most obvious one to speak to would be Oberyn. I think he's de facto one of the meta-defining characters there. I'm just trying to find him on my list, and there he is. I'm going to tentatively put him in the SS range as well, and I think most of you would likely agree based upon what we were talking about with Velas. And before anyone agrees too hard, let me at least make my case for that. He's one of those rainbow units that you can slot into a majority of other comps and is relatively self-sufficient given his bulk. He's got the shield. He's got a unique attack type in Pierce. Really hard-hitting debuffs as well between not only the Earth debuff but the all-element debuff. Overall, I can't really see any massive flaws in him. He hits agility relatively well. The vision cards are great. I see no reason why he would be lower than an S at the very least, but I think SS is probably a decent spot. But I'll let you guys take it.
I'm inclined to agree, especially with his rending 2x3 skill that can also stun. A great boon offense-wise, and yeah, as you mentioned, his LB is astounding.
I totally agree. I honestly can't think of a nerf team why I would reach out and use another DPS over Oberyn.
Yep.
Definitely. Okay, cool. So Oberyn SS. And, all right, we'll keep going on then. And some of the other Earth units. How about Noctis then? Because I know he's the other Earth bro. We thinking S or an A for him?
Killing us.
I would agree with that.
Just his ability to tank and also the armature effect. Quite the boon. Also, he has sure hit that hits up, you know, and I believe it's across AoE. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, between having that short hit and his ability to tank while also having the armature effect, all of his spellblade bluffs, spellblade buffs,
right?
By far, I put him in S.
Yeah, I agree. That was one of my favorite things upon reviewing him was that he was one of the few characters that really could be built for both physical or magical. He's got the ability to kind of do both. That all element resist passive is fantastic, and then yeah, just between the two, he's got enough stats that he can kind of be versatile in that way. So I think you hit the nail on the
Right,
on the head.
and I feel like it's easy to forget that he has access to 3 different damage types, and his limit break is an imperil for all of them.
Right.
And he does have a weaker version of that tracer essentially ability, or the armature effect as we called it.
Yep.
So it's not as strong as Astrius is, but it's still incredibly useful.
Absolutely. I mean, it's still a charge counter at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like that's still got value no matter what. Okay, cool. So I think we covered that on August. Questions, you had something you wanted to say about him?
And to that end, we just had a recently guild battle versus a guild that was full lightning wall. Noctis did his job. He can get really high lightning resistance. If we need him to break down a lightning wall, he would definitely be one of the units who would bring on part of that team.
Definitely. Okay. I love it's true. It's true. We've seen firsthand. All right. So then some of the other Earth units here, you know, just kind of naming off a few names. Eileen's definitely not on this list. Halloween Ryu probably not on this list. Ketone, the MA2.
I put Zaza
definitely
in an A.
would. Yeah. So Zazan, I was one of the others. I would agree with the A. I think
Ketone's a B, I feel like.
I could go with B. I can get behind that.
Her
I
ability
think should
to
still be a
Summer
B even
Lilith
for
would be
MA2.
good.
Yeah, and a B means good but won't get you far. I could agree with that. She's a little more niche on the map type. You know, Drain Force requires certain conditions to be met in terms of elevation and spacing. Now, she does get some forgiveness on that, I think. Where, oh no, I'm sorry, there's Aldoa that got the range adjustment. But yeah, her mobility is obviously fantastic, but also is kind of not a hard hitting unit unless you really do get that Drain Force off. She does have some of the status effects, but I do think B is probably a decent spot for her there too.
And I
Do
would
we have any
put
thoughts
probably
on-
Fred in C, and maybe Moraga.
Oh,
What about Summer Lilith? What are your thoughts, Trace?
She was great for like 1 or 2 maps.
Okay,
But-
that's a valid assessment.
In my heart, she's much higher.
right. Wait a minute. So we did mention. I actually want to come back to Summer Lilith because that's my my unit on my home screen. Murago, you were saying C. I would agree with that. Tanky individual. Halloween Fred, we were thinking. Any particular spot on here?
Place her in C as well.
I'm with her.
For Trace's previous statement, yeah.
I'd agree with that. Luell, I know we had some fun with that a week or two ago. What do you think about Luell, guys?
B. Because she's
Oh,
good.
B or
but won't
C.
get you far.
Great
I could
for
agree with
physical meta. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the most underrated things about Luell at the B is the impenetrable or what do you call it? The aversion to be broken on defense. Like she can't get her defense broken with the right AI tuning. There's a ton of that available right now in the game, and her physical bulk can't be understated for sure.
Yeah, and with law of geo-assimilation being non-reflectable as
Right.
well, on top of being strike and draining back HP.
Right. Absolutely fantastic against Celeste, who obviously shuts down most magic users there. Yep. Yeah, Summer Lilith. Unfortunately, I've done as much as I can to try to make her work because she's one of my favorite characters. But there was a time she's surprisingly tanky. I know I memed on her with that like kind of infamous like laughing video, but her defense stats got high enough that like she's got some bulk, but like I don't think it's worth nearly anything at this point in the game. So I'll probably leave her off. All right, I think that relatively does it for the Earth units here. I think we've kind of covered. Oh, Winter Venera, obviously kind of a de facto magic tank at one point when there wasn't a ton of them around. Anyone have strong feelings on Winter Venera?
I wish she was better.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
Same.
She's an SS tier guild raid unit, and
Yes.
not for
Yeah.
battle though.
Yep.
Great
Absolutely.
yep. Absolutely great within perils for guild raid. Yep.
Yep. So, okay. Guild Wars, though, unfortunately doesn't make the cut quite yet. All right. On that note, we'll move on here. We have Lightning up next. And so, uh, you know, a dozen and a half different characters I'm sure that can make this list. I don't even know where to start. We want to start with Charlotte just for fun.
Off the top of my head, that's
I was just going to say she's right there with Joom, like, if not even better to some degree.
with Resnick's ability to help sustain her
Yeah.
and provide a physical barrier. She's already a great magic resistance tank. What is her downfall? Pierce, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. It's Pierce.
But again, that's mitigated with Resnick's sustain capabilities to again provide her with the physical barrier and just keep her health up while retaining the vision card synergy.
Definitely. The debuff resistance is huge for me for Charlotte. That's one of the reasons why I kind of have her ahead of Joom in this spot where the defense and spirit unable to be broken, like that's such a prevalent break that seems to be coming around more and more often that being able to avoid it altogether is pretty large.
She can
And even though it won't come up for a while, her MA2, unlike Bonce, is actually going to help her keep up in that it does give her innate hate. So I don't want to be focusing too much on the future in that sense, but it's important to note that she's going to remain relevant.
Yeah. Definitely a good caveat. Okay,
Yep,
so
and just not too long ago, I think on this very map we were on, the cave, we were making Lightning teams beat Earth teams. She is that good, especially paired with Resnick.
absolutely. All right, cool. So we'll keep Charlotte at S for now. I think it's totally appropriate. What do we think about Cloud coming up next?
I am biased and would put him in SS. I'm absolutely biased with Claude. And not just because he's FF7's, Final Fantasy's arguably figurehead, but just because of Triple Slash, help his bus, his flexibility to either be a heavy bruiser with close range physical, but also having the capabilities of sharpshoot and barrage depending on the map.
I would disagree. I wouldn't put him any higher than S, just because I feel like while he can be somewhat survivable for considering how much damage he does, I feel like Lightning has gotten so many, particularly and specifically to global, there's plenty of other great Lightning heavy hitters so that he doesn't have to be your de facto choice anymore. And he is, outside of when you're able to use those ranger abilities, which is not true for every map, he is still specifically limited to slash damage. And on top of that, he really only thrives in a Lightning comp. You can't use him in a lot of other kind of different builds.
I'll add to that. I think he is A with the release of Esther. I think how the meta has shifted from who kills whoever first into who can outlast and sustain more. Cloud out. If you don't get a reflex on Cloud, he typically goes down. He doesn't take much hits or take many hits. Before you could literally send Oberon or even Noctis on Cloud, he would be dead in 2 hits tops. Maybe 1 from a dive from Oberon. Now with Resnick jumping in to give them all boosts, it changes a little bit, but unless you want to run a team with no heals, which may work for maybe one swing, maybe 2, depending on your matchups, I don't think he has the sustainability to really fight through two guild battles. and for that, I think he's A at best. He's not a bad unit by far, but if you tell me to pick right now between Esther and Cloud, I'm going to pick Esther
All
like
right.
7 times.
So can I throw a caveat in here because we're starting to make some comparisons to other characters in the game? Can we actually make a comparison to our own tier list so far? So right now, if you look at the S tier, we have More the Merrier, Aranea, and Gilgamesh. Is Cloud worse than them?
Yes.
Good point. I would say he's.
So
I guess.
Quiz is a hard yes on that.
I don't know.
Uh,
I agree with Esther, and like if you had if you had a lightning comp with Charlotte and you had 2 more spots, and you have Cloud, Esther, Ibarra, and Resnick, you're probably not going to pick Cloud.
it's true, although that's not a reflection necessarily on Cloud's usage so much as it is the other good lightning units.
Yeah.
That's where I think this is where the fun begins, where you start seeing our rankings compared to how we evaluated the other units so far. I'm
For
okay.
me, S or SS. It's where if on the team, is this the first name on the sheet? Is this the second name on the sheet? If it's not, I can't justify an S.
Well, and I feel like if you compare him to those other ones that we have in S, is those units all fit in a lot of different styles of comps and ways that you can approach, how you want the team to work. Whereas with Cloud, he's very one-dimensional.
Okay, I'm okay tentatively leaving him in the A for now. I think there's enough downsides we talked about. Situationally, can be more. Actually, to be fair, if we refer back to our ranking, A is really good but has exploitable flaws. I feel like that actually does describe Cloud relatively well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that is kind of fair. So all right, well, we can always circle back again. We can always shift around, and I'm sure we will once we get to the end of it. But keep going through Lightning because my goodness, there's so many characters here. I'm gonna obviously there's a bunch that come to mind. Ibarra and Esther, definitely 2 of them. Do you want to do Ibarra first, real quickly here? I would imagine that Ibarra's got to be an A or I would imagine an A, if not even maybe an S. Anyone have any strong thoughts on Ibarra?
I can't disagree with that. You could give them an A or give them S. She's going to be great enough. She is the premier lightning magic damage dealer for now. So I definitely would not run on anywhere near that. So yes, an S would be fair.
Well, and real quickly, just on that note, so one of the things about Ibarra that I particularly like is A, not all of her abilities are reflectable, so she can eat through the runic blade, or whatever you call it. She's got multiple types of attacks. It's magic and missile and slash. She's got a couple fantastic imperils in her kit. Overall, bunch of survivability and bulk that if we're talking about Terra's bulk and just do damage, Ibarra is at that level, if not more in my opinion. Obviously doesn't have the guaranteed hit, but can be geared to come close. But I do think she's got enough that, again, if you kind of take a step back, current meta aside, I feel like S is kind of appropriate given that, some of the best, few caveats, why not universal, but overall, really versatile.
Sounding LB as
Yeah, and I feel like, to your point, she has a lot of things in her kit that go beyond pure damage. And on top of that, like you have little details that can make a big difference, like her being demon type. So she's immediately not going to be affected by things like Maneater.
Absolutely.
And having a ton of Maneater herself as well.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. All right, I feel like it's a good consensus. We'll keep going along here. Again, just for the sake of time, if you will. I don't know how much more we can...
I would put Esther in S.
I would agree with that too. Esther and S. My only downside with... No, I don't even have a downside with Esther. Where is she? There she is. Esther with S. Yeah, she's got enough slash resistance penetration that I don't think that's an issue. The bulk obviously can't be understated. She might be like the bulkiest DPS in the game. It's particularly when you could put her with Resnick. My God, it's impossible to kill her.
And her ability to, of course, sustain her own self with her drink. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely think that's fair. And Dan Ubeck, who I just saw in chat, she does technically have missile damage. It's magic oriented, but her hairpin dart is a missile type attack. So that, just for clarifying for those that are seeing in chat here. So, all right, cool. So Esther's there. Eyeballing some of the other lightning units. Fred, I don't think makes this list very map specific. I mean, maybe she's a C. I could give Fred a C.
I would put her in B or C.
Yeah, I mean,
Her MA2 is actually really nice.
yeah, there's enough missile cards for lightning and enough buffs with aim fire between her and Cloud and some of the other units. Definitely,
She just has a lot of competition in a comp for like spots in a lightning team, but I feel like depending on what your account even has, she's still a worthwhile choice.
hold on.
Yeah.
Her longevity, like she's one of the launch units, and she's still sticking around and semi-relevant with PvP. Just that alone, as well, I feel like warrants her placement in C.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, just real quick, I do stand corrected. I was 100% positive that Ibarra had a missile type attack. Apparently, she does not. I could have sworn she did. Am I wrong on that? Apparently not.
I think, well, Moore does. Moore does, but not Ibarra. She does have all those slash attacks, but there are a few things. Joe, like, yeah, no, I don't think she does.
Nope, that's Thunder Mage in chat. Thank you for pointing that out. I really could have sworn she had one missile type attack. Apparently not. Thank you. I just don't want to mislead anybody here. So thanks, guys. Sorry to cut everybody off there. So, all right, we'll keep Fred at that C. A couple of the lightning units here. Renan, any strong thoughts on where he might go?
Rash. Resnick
You.
S.
I'll agree with that. Resnick.
I can rant on that, but
Yeah.
we can go on either talk about Resnick or Renan either first.
I would agree. Resnick is S. And she kind of can go in. I don't want to call it a rainbow comp. I doubt you ever would, but I know tinkering with Arena this last week, she still does relatively well, even with her buffs, because it's still what? Just looking again here. Debuff resistance. It's still single target resistance. Still a ton of healing. So obviously you would probably not use her outside of the lightning comp. It only makes her that much better. But she's still relatively well rounded enough that I think the S is most definitely warranted.
With Renan, what I'll just say is that if you don't have Ibarra, he's maybe A tier, but if you do have Ibarra, he belongs in the garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact is, just AI just does not know how to prioritize healing, even though you could make him heal. You would have to, and this is the problem with AI in the programming. Any barrier skill, which basically is a single unit barrier, like Hilfe has this barrier, Renan has this barrier, Garvall has this barrier, they'll always use that skill first.
Right.
Meaning, if they use that skill, they won't heal anybody else, and kind of really detracts on his kit, which would enable him to heal. I thought he could heal. He never healed unless it turned that skill off. And if you turn it off, you remove his survivability.
Right.
And so on a short map, it doesn't work.
Yep. Nope. Totally agreed. Yeah, and obviously he's very much a product of the runic shield as well of Celeste. That just makes him completely useless for those few turns. So, when you're talking about that chess matchup in particular, he doesn't have a leg to stand on. Yeah, I hate to say he's a trash unit because I think there's some value. It just doesn't get utilized the way it should. All right, and then I think the only other real lightning unit that's worth meriting a conversation. I don't think Velna's in that conversation at all. Queen, any strong thoughts? I know we've had a couple people tinker with her with some relative success. Anybody think she deserves a spot on the tier list?
I'd put her in C.
I can see that.
B or C.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can make a niche use of it. I've seen applications where she's been getting 6 stars within our guild.
Right.
I can't just say she's just C. I think she can maybe work.
Right.
Yeah.
Nope, I agree. There's it's not perfect. Takes some tinkering. But as you just mentioned, we have a member in the #1 guild who's been getting 6 stars in Guild Wars with Queen. So it's to say that by our definitions, not usable, I think would be false. Like we're seeing high quality results, so it's at least warrants a spot. To put it that way. All right, and apparently I don't have. Someone just mentioned Skahal on here. I know some people love Skahal. I personally have never found a use even with the MA2. Oh, and 9S. How could I forget 9S? So, honorable mention if Skahal should be on here or not. Anyone have a strong feeling?
I'll just say that his accuracy is so bad that he'll miss a tank.
And it hurts. I wish it was better.
Yeah.
Ignore me.
Yeah. 9S. Any strong thoughts from anybody? It's
I
tough.
like the objective of it. I like what he should be bringing. I like the variety. He gives you defensive buffs. He gives you accuracy buffs. But he seems like he's like a buffer in a team where you have 3 units. He just doesn't cut it. Because, again, you would have to rely on either your healer or your tank to do most of the damage, and that's going to be really really hard with like how strong healers are now, basically on what's been released, and also with, let's say, trust stones.
Yeah. I could see a place where in certain metas maybe he thrives, but it's funny when you look at him on paper, he has many of the same attributes that we talk about other people. He's got a typeless damage attack. He's got some status effects. He's got protect and all those great buffs. Theoretically, has access to a couple different attack types. He's got the pierce and has it slash as well. Like all those things, as we talk about these heroes, he has that in common. But you're right, just in practice, haven't seemed to make it work for one reason or another. It's hard to justify him as that C, even though he's like sounds and looks that good on paper. I know stat wise too, like agility really isn't great either. Kind of a big demerit. But yeah, I would agree with the overall assessment unless anyone else has other thoughts. No? Alright. Alright, we'll keep going on here then. Water up next. So we'll start with Celeste and then we'll go down the list afterward. Anyone any particular thoughts on Celeste?
I would say SS, hands down.
I would agree with that, and I'm going to put her there preemptively. Completely agreed.
Complete meta changer. Yep. Shut down magic. So force the physical meta. Great sustain. Protect shell and runic blade on one buff. How can you go wrong?
Right. And if she gets
So,
that
Gumi,
second buff,
yeah.
it's insane.
Right. Gumi literally had to make a unit that was just released last week to remove runic, and there's another one coming out called Darkfina. She's a meta changer. We've used her extensively, and yes, she is that good.
Definitely. And quite honestly, a great rainbow tank too. I've absolutely tinkered with her in arena this week, for instance, where you're running Leela. I've seen a lot of people using Black Rose Elena and other magic users, and like she definitely can fit with a few different rainbow comps if you need just a well-rounded solid tank that has like a good AI, some good movement, and overall survivability. Like I think she fits that better than most of the other tanks would, because she's also not very reliant on the vision cards. Obviously, some of them really jettison her to the next level. The what do you call it card? The 15% agility card, Miranda card is just lights out insane on her for the water comp. But yeah, overall, really really great tank.
Yeah, she has all of the things that we were talking about are what now define a tank in terms of both having innate hate and a way to generate it, as well as protect and shell, having added single target resist, all of the, versatility of the vision cards you just mentioned, least of all not to, be the agility and lightning res one. And you can even use espers to counteract a lot of her weaknesses. And to what we were saying about Velis, you could apply, just like you were saying, Will, to Celeste as far as rainbow viability. I know we've used her with duos like Oberon and Noctis, and when you consider what a lot of those units' weaknesses are, by extension, even units like Esther or Arnea, where they are, say, magic weak,
Right.
just having Runic alone on top of everything else in her kit is going to help balance a lot of that out. And then when you consider that we're starting to get some of those like 90 cost espers and VCs that have the cross element hybridization, then all of a sudden she's not just a really great tank for water, but she's also going to fit in even easier with ice. So
Absolutely 10,000%. And lest we even forget to mention just the AoE resistance down on demand. That's a supremely fantastic debuff to just apply to a wide area of people. Particularly considering it's one of the stronger resistances you can have at the moment. That if she can just negate it right out of the gate. So yeah, I couldn't add any more than we already had.
And last but not least, great passives. Her Rune Guard reduces all damage. Her Spirit and Defense is respectable. It's not like kind of like, let's say, a Rain or a Fryavia where you have no defense. So if any melee hits you, you're gonna die. It's
Right.
not like that for her.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Yeah.
And I will say she deserves special credit too for taking one of the most ubiquitous units in the game for like 6 months, which was Jaden, and completely erasing him off the map.
Done. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
One last point on Celeste, the ability to toggle her movement from 3 to 4, or if you want to kind of change things up with Bowtie for whatever reason, also great. So
Definitely. Yeah, the movement versatility is big too. Okay, cool. All right. We'll move on to the second best, or maybe the first best water unit, Astro Boy, as we lovingly call him, or Astrius, more publicly known. Any particular thoughts by you guys? SS tier? I can't imagine him being any lower than that.
Segment of space, yeah. By all means, segment of space. Crystal Tracer, previously mentioned on the podcast here, it shuts down so much. His versatility, his range. I can't think of one downside to him. His Purge having two uses. If you put him in A or B, I will slap you just digitally. I love you, Will, but no. Put him in SS where he belongs. Put
I would
respect on
agree.
him. Shoot him to space.
I would agree.
I think the only downfall with him is they gave him sniper as a second sub job, and they could have used a better, given us an
That's
even
so
better
true.
second sub job.
Yep.
I mean, we could have given him a better sub job, give him Drain Force or whatever. I mean, just make him unkillable, give him re-raise. I
Give
mean,
him
come on.
reflex.
Yep,
Could
yep.
you imagine?
I know,
Yeah,
right?
No, I don't even want Reflex. This is even better than Reflex.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right, you're right,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, I love him.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
Good
Jace.
one.
I'll let you talk.
Oh no, sorry. I was just gonna say Nurgen's spot on, and I feel like the one thing that would have actually been beneficial from the sub there for Sniper is the spell spread, and he doesn't even have it.
Right. It's true. My favorite thing about Asterisk in particular, because this is a Guild Wars oriented tier list, right? I feel like in certain maps he actually gets stronger on the second attack or defense than the first one. I know just last week when we were doing our really short map, his AI prioritization is that slash resistance up to himself and allies, the self absorption, yada yada. But then if you use both of those abilities on a fight one, the fact that your courage is your fight two buff is insane. That he also not only has the two casts of it, but when you talk about the sustainability and the ability to get multiple defense, I feel like his AI is just so good for that. It makes it almost impossible to just wipe them in one hit. And even if you do, or like you open them, to for whoever has to follow up and scrap that team is going to have a very difficult time regardless. So I think that's a really big thing that separates him from some of the other DPS, even if he has some weaknesses and limitations on his attack types and slash resist penetration and things like that. Only one use on the limit break, so he doesn't get that second fight. I think regardless, it still ends up being the SS to your guys' point.
Yeah, and
even
they had
after
to give us Esther just to help balance that.
Literally, you had to run Lightning or a very tuned composition to take down water defense and defenses. A lot of top 10 guilds run Astrius on defense. They've been doing well. It is hard to clear them unless you really had the right tools for it, like we did.
And I will say too, I think there is some recency bias where that water map of 20% agility was so broken for water. If you do look at this more recent map, the Crystal Caves one, like water is very good, but I don't know if Astrius is in the SS tier in the current map. We're seeing, a lot of other variations of comps. So I do almost question it, is it the SS or is it the S? I still think it's SS at the end of the day. But definitely a little more debatable with the more recent map where we've had some of that bias from the water map, I think, kind of left over.
It's a fair point. I'm actually going to bring in some data and analysis from how I've looked at top 10 performance. One of the guilds, second place right now, is Steel Wings. For the whole map until literally like a day ago, they ran the water cap on defense, and most teams did not clear them. They only really lost to Visipur and maybe one other guild, but I think I could be wrong. But no, it was still working. The other map where there was 20% agility up for water, yes, that was just totally broken, but he still held his own on this map. Totally. It wasn't totally like it was useless.
Right.
Yeah, I think water, because it dominated so hard there, has very high expectations put on it. But I think, Will, to your point, it shows that even such an extremely strong comp like that still is beholden to the map itself.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Well, and my comparison, and when you think about like these meta-defining DPS, when I think back to Black Rose Elena and Elena, I don't remember many maps where they were never the number one de facto best. And I don't know if you can make that argument right now with Water. There certainly does seem to be some competitive, circle going on that I don't know if it's as de facto number one as it was for those former meta units, but it's really damn close.
Right, which I think is great too and really healthy overall.
Totally. Yeah, that's not a complaint. That's definitely not a complaint. So, all right, we've given him enough love. The rest of the water cast here, some quick hit names. Aerith, I know she was a interesting secret weapon against Mono Light. Any thoughts on Aerith at the moment?
It's
We'll wait till
hard.
after MA2. I
Yeah,
can't give her a high ranking for that for right now. She's on the
no.
list. She's not going to be front runner on that list.
Nope.
Not by much.
No. Do you think
Yeah,
she,
She had her time
if
for
it hadn't
environment.
been for Velis, I feel like she would have been that for water just by design and necessity. But at this point, there's simply no reason to run her if you have Velis.
It's akin to Velis and Rosa, for instance. Disregarding Rosa's awful AI issues. Now, having said that about Aerith, Lara, how do you guys feel about her?
I could go Laura with a C. I've experimented as
I
much as
would
I
say
can with
B,
her. Yeah,
personally.
I wouldn't argue my hard against that. She just seems to get countered so easily by some things that are supposed to, or at least commonly prevalent. The missile damage is fine. I've just never seen her really beat anyone down with it. That's kind of my biggest problem. Is just that she just dies before she can kill things.
Or
To
I would
that
even
thing,
say, to your point, Will, I would put her. Oh, sorry, Q, you go ahead.
just to be fair, I would call her more like a water Frederica
Yeah,
or Nivlu.
Accurate.
If you rank them B, she's B. If you rank them C, it's C. I mean, that's just how all range units are. They're going to have some range. They're going to do some damage. They're going to die really easy. At least they both have
Yeah.
reflex. We'll work on the right teams. I have played pure water teams with Lara in class match, and I have got destroyed by them. And there are some I just literally walk over. It literally depends. And even for Guild War, it can be just the same. But no, we don't see a lot of them for the fact that it is teams need to be resilient. She's not going to be that resilient team where I'm going to have her. She's going to hold 2 or 3 teams by herself. That's just not going to be the case.
right.
Yeah, and I would say, as a interesting comparison there, I would definitely agree with that and put Lara in C. But on the other hand, I would put Winter Victoria in B at least.
I agree with that. Spell spread for her is chef's kiss.
Definitely. She's got great range, a lot of bulkiness. Obviously feeds into the missile nature of some of the water cards, so I would agree with that. Yeah. I see more applicability of Winter Victoria than I do Lara Croft. Lara Croft seems to not work in as many instances as Winter Victoria probably could.
Grace, you've played with Rachel. How do you feel about her?
Oh. Trace, did you hear that about Rachess? Argalia asking you about your use with her?
Oh, she's really fun, but I would say has the. I mean, on top of the obvious similarities, I see her the same way as I would see Baruch, except I would say he has a much harder time thriving in a wind comp than the way that Regis can, you know, really shine in a good water comp. But she has too many caveats and things you have to do to where what she's bringing to the table isn't something that you could honestly get easier and with more versatility and flexibility. But she is able to hit really hard and do really well. You just have to make too many considerations for me to feel like she deserves higher than like a C ranking.
Fair. And to be fair, she would be the first selection quest unit to be on this tier list if we decided to put her in, which
Yeah.
speaks to the quality of them overall so far. All right, well, so a couple other water units here, just kind of quick hit as we get toward closer to the end of this. Only ones that really I think stick out as maybe worth the discussion would be Moore and Titus. Anybody strong thoughts on either of them? I know we've talked about farm as well. Just the AI just doesn't work. It should, it could. We wish shoulda, woulda, coulda. It just doesn't. I don't know how much time we want to spend on farm, but yeah, Moore or Titus. Anybody thoughts?
And Summer Elsrel.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Summer Elstra. Oh, I'm sorry. Summer Elstra. I completely forgot. Yes, definitely in the conversation.
Yeah. I would prefer Summer LC over Moore.
Yep.
Especially due to her physical resilience and where we are in the meta. But I mean, as water is, like she's kind of CB. She's somewhere lower there. Like water has far better units that they can field as opposed to Summer Elsrel. But she does have a place if you have her, by all means. Titus, I would be lying if I said I recall what his MA2 brings to the table, but I'm sure we'll see more of him. But that's future tense. As of right now, fair nod.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, I'm comfortable putting her at the B for now. Do you think is she equal to Winter Victoria and above Lara, or is that out of whack?
I would say that's a safe place to
Yeah.
put her at,
Okay.
as opposed to C,
And again,
especially given Scholars innate devitalizing wind,
yep,
law of geoabsorption, even though she's
Yeah,
more of
I
an
think she
aqua
has a lot of
version.
competition for a
Mhm.
spot, but I think standalone and trying to look at her, as much through a lens of what she brings to the table, I think she has a lot of versatility that I would say warrants a B.
definitely. Right, and it's tough mentality wise too. You're right. When you think of a 3-person comp, a lot of times these people get beaten out, but that I don't think that should mean that they're a lower grade. Because again, the theoretically you would compare each to each other, like someone in a B tier to someone else in the B tier, um, regardless if you wouldn't maybe put them in that 3-person comp. So I think that's a hard thing to conceptualize too all the time. But I think okay. I think it's pretty okay in terms of water units. We left off Winter Ramada, definitely no, and Glacial is power crept also. I haven't seen her in forever, but again, we can always revisit this toward the end. I think next one now. Are we already at light and dark? Have we gone through the? I think we got through all the others. Yeah. Um, yeah, we did because we started with fire. So we'll start with light, I guess. If you guys want, you want to go with light units here. I feel like probably starting with what Elena would be a safe choice here as the first unit to kick off the light discussion.
We can start off with her.
So Starlight Elena, what are we thinking for her?
And my definition and how we've seen her and how she just fell off because of literally how many maps they made anti-light. She is a safe SS for me. She, I think, is the bar where we treat evade units for light, and actually for most units, she is courage. She is highly evasive. She works really well with Jaden, and I guess basically any other light unit that's basically not a healer. Even with
Block
healers, I've seen
Violet.
teams where she's placed with Yuna
Right,
cannot rate her any less than SS, and it would be fair.
right. And real quick for those in chat, someone brought up a really good point here. I must have missed her here with the MA with the EX upgrade. I do not have Ildira, regular Ildira, on this tier list. I need to add her. I would imagine she'd probably be maybe a C. We can talk about that later,
I
but
would say C at best.
yeah, I
Yeah.
just want to at least acknowledge that in the chat that I do not have her here, but she theoretically could. So, segue aside, back to Quistis's point on Starlight Elena. I would also agree. They actively do things on every single map to make sure that she and they are relatively unusable, and is the bar for dominance and flexibility across a variety of different Guild War maps as well. And best chainer, right? The chaining ability is out of this world. So I agree with the SS here. Anyone else have thoughts on Elena?
Quest said it's spot on. Dre said it's spot on. SS for a reason. Great multi hits. Great kit as a whole. Pairs well with any light unit. I personally like her with Locke or Violet.
Yep.
If you want to lean into evade, which hasn't been as in vogue, but yeah, those two would be in my consideration. Granted, they're not SS like Elena, but those are units that I'd run with Elena.
Totally. So, okay, I feel like saying enough of that. We'll get to that exact point. What do we think about Locke here in terms of a rating?
I feel like I would put him in S, and I am welcome to being incorrect about that. Boon of the Phoenix, him having innate re-raise, AP Hunt, taking away AP from your enemies in a cross shape. Um, God, his evasion is great. He's got good damage output.
And he has a dispel also, doesn't he? If I'm
Yep.
thinking of that correctly, yeah.
It's just this belt blade is honestly how I would rate it even higher than this ABC hunt for that reason.
Yeah.
Are we okay with him at the S, or does he even think have a spot to potentially be higher?
S is safe. I mean, we're at the category where it's either S plus or SS, and I don't think there's an S plus, so I think S would happily cover that.
Pretty okay with that. All right.
Now, in terms of the light evade units, Draced, Quistis, Will, how do you feel about Violet? What are your thoughts about her impact and global.
I would put
Uh,
Violet in A. Sorry, Q, you go ahead.
go ahead, finish.
I would put her in A. I feel like having 4 move is one of those things that is always helpful in theory, but it not being able to control that, I think, is like one of the same problems as like with Zazon, is that if you can't give him the runway to get himself into a good place, you're gonna get them killed really easily. And so you have to then start making choices about your comp based around them and how to control them versus how to use them to your best advantage. And so it does help that she has courage, but she doesn't have a lot of other things that provide a lot of utility to the team offensively compared to Locke or Elena.
Right.
I agree. Could I throw something in there just in case
Yeah.
that changes the way you thought of things? I agree with the Zazan comparison, but the main difference, Zazan, as far as I know, doesn't have an active teammate buff. So yes, he will just ooga booga straight ahead across the battlefield. But the one of her favorites, the Dazzler Centrillion, which is the increased evade rate and the restore CT ability, is a teammate buffing ability. So I don't know if she has that same problem of not being
That is a
controllable.
really good point, but I will say that you then have to really make sure you fine tune your opener, or else she's going to start spamming that on everybody if she
Right.
Yep.
doesn't hit everybody the first time.
Right. That
And she'll
yeah.
start hugging other units and be more prone to being destroyed.
Right. Nope, fair point. I just wanted to bring that up as a wrinkle because I like the
No,
comparison.
really good point.
You're
Really good
right.
point.
Move
Because
forward
like
can.
you said, yeah.
Agreed. I agree with the A on Violet. Locke just came right before. We basically when Locke came out, we put him on defense, and I think versus those old guild, I think they saw the results of that. Just the ability of where Locke was just dispelling hate on the tank, and then Starlight, Elena, and Locke just went to town on the
Yeah.
rest of their team.
Yep. Yep. It's true. Well, and plus when you throw him next to Elena, you can't gear for both spirit and defense. Like one of them is going to beat the crap out of you. You know what I mean? Like, and they both are fairly hard hitting, obviously, and have chaining potential. He's got some. We didn't even talk about the slash apparel. Have him do the 38% slash apparel, and you have Elena following up. Like, the synergy definitely is there, and obviously Violet can kind of contribute to that. I just think she's obviously more PVE oriented with some of her abilities. And again, you're talking that 3-man comp, maybe not as reliable, not as much utility as Locke does in terms of game changing things. I think A is probably appropriate for her.
Yeah.
I'll go to the one other point, and since we're talking about Guild War and how I see it, we put all three of them together. The thing
Yeah.
is,
And charging.
it's probably be wonderful on teams where you can pick and choose who you attack. Sadly, when someone picks and chooses to attack you, a guild comp like that, where you have 3 invasive units, if someone's geared for that, they're going to clear you, and then your friend, no
Right.
problem. Team, you're not going to have a defense.
Yeah.
You need someone to balance it out. You probably want a tank. I'm sure in the other in JP, love that kind of stuff.
Right.
I just don't see it being a viable strategy for defense. We can go through that based on how Visibor has on defensive results. We can talk about that in the video.
For sure. I have for a long time been of the opinion that tankless evade, it really isn't feasible in the majority of instances. That there's too much sure hit. There's too much in terms of how you can target and chain certain people down. You really need that tank not only to draw the enemy attacks first, drain them of their high AP abilities, but also theoretically, like having your evade units be near that tank not only allows them to be captured in more AoE attacks, which sounds counterintuitive, but you almost want because there's number one, not a lot of guaranteed hit AoE. So if someone is spamming an AoE ability, they are more likely to hit rather than someone who might think of Barrage versus Sharpshoot. If you have Elena next to Engelbert, they're more opt to use Barrage as opposed to Elena by herself, which gets the Sharpshoot. And then secondly, they also get buffs to Agility and Luck when they're near the teammates for that affinity. So I do like the idea of like having a tank that someone can kind of like maintain aggro and have people to kind of stay near them to buff and draw the higher hitting abilities. So I would agree that it's very difficult to run that evasion without a main aggro source. Okay. Cool. So we'll keep moving on here. Obviously, a ton of late units to get through. Engelbert, what do we think about him?
At this point, I would put him in A,
I think it's fair.
maybe even B.
I would agree. I mean, he seems to be carried by the vision cards more than anything. Having that like perma, 20 unit and AOE resist, obviously the courage. The magic weakness hasn't bitten him as hard as you might think, given the innate weakness to it. Yeah, I don't know if I have a strong opinion, A or B. I think probably no. I would probably go A because our B tier is good but won't get you far, and Engelbert definitely will get you far in that mono like comp.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Yeah, more than happy
He's
putting
quite
him in A. And
Sorry, go ahead, Quistis.
I put him in A.
I was gonna add to how easy it is to build him between all the tickets that we get, beginners bundles if you choose to use it on Engelbert, which is something I would advise against. Well, unless you really want to go light, that's absolutely an option for you. But by far, A would be a proper spot for him, having access to Courage twice, Retribution Drain, being able to pump out damage if necessary. Yeah, especially as we're moving towards more physical.
Right. He's got physical
Now-
barrier too. Stanley Wall is physical barrier. Yep.
Also Sentinel.
Yep.
Yep.
Totally. So, all right, cool. That's a good spot. Kind of going through the light units here again as well. Moving along. Jaden. What do we think about him?
This is interesting.
Yeah, let me
And I
phrase
think
this.
is actually
Yeah, imagine that Celis doesn't exist in the game. Where does Jaden go?
I would
you're-
still
Honestly-
almost want to put him in A. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
me. Celis is going to be temporary. I'm not just going to say Celis exists as Jaden's always going to be A or lower. No, I think he's been S for a while, and he will still remain to be S as we have explored and keep going on releasing other units that don't revolve around Celis.
Wholeheartedly agree. Strong guest contender. Great, amazing, astounding range. Great group buffs. Being able to boost the agility for your team allows for an amazing opener. Great versatility. Having access to Cura, jamming thrust. You can't go wrong with Jaden being an S.
Well, and to that point too, while I initially was tempted to want to classify him as A rank, I feel like he also does inhabit a very unique and singular place in a light comp that you don't get from any of their other units.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. It's true, and he was one of the
So-
first to talk about magic scaling, physical or typically physical type damage, but to have missile attack be scaling off the spirit is a relatively hard thing to gear against if you're not prepared for it.
It synergizes so well with Sarlona, so can't even complain with all the visiting cards that kind of just didn't make sense just with Elena. But when he came out, it changed.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. Totally. All right. Cool. I'm cool with Jaden as well. Someone in chat brought him up, and Jerace will laugh at this for a second. Any thoughts on Lucio?
I am intrigued.
Yeah, I almost want to put him as TBD because I'll be honest, I've not done a ton of actual hard tinkering with him yet, but I think he's probably the most slept on light unit that currently exists.
Yeah, I feel like when they were kicking off the whole CW series, not just the TV, but and I remember we were all trying to figure out how he would be used, especially when you consider these other really extremely strong light units that we were just going over. Where does he fit in with that? And how do you compete with Engel as a tank, right? But as time goes on, I remember thinking initially, okay, he's going to need at least a 4-month runway to even be usable as they gradually unlocked him.
Right.
So I think because of that, to your point, Will, you hit the nail on the head that he's extremely slept on. But now that he does have everything unlocked, and especially now that Dark is making a resurgence, I think his sheer ability to stack Dark Res alone, as well as, do things that other than a single target version through the limit break of Summer Kilfei, his AoE light res in barrel is huge, and he has, I think, only compared to Celeste or Joom, as a sort of pseudo tank, he has a really big AoE that has a really nice
Yeah.
factor where you think, oh, bravery down, no big deal. But, you do that or make him do that more than once. That's going to be a huge mitigating factor in their ability to not just do damage to you, but also proc their counters.
Right.
So it has multiple uses there. And, you then consider the fact that you can make him, do strike, but also like pierce at least through one attack. So he
Right.
has some versatility there. And then you can't also then forget either that his mastery ability, despite being a light unit, is applicable to all elements.
Right.
And then his sword that you get just even adds on top of
Everything.
that
And
with
his
10 more element
defense can't be
resist.
broken. No defense break at all.
Defense, yeah.
Absolutely. You literally hit the head on everything there. His survivability is way understated, particularly against some of the dark units, as we've seen, and as you mentioned with the dark resistance. So I'm actually hesitant to put him somewhere because I actually don't know for sure what the grade is. But like, I want to put him at like a B or an A. Am I like way off on that?
No, I'm inclined to agree with you with the greater domain of light. To Drake's point, being a great anti-dark mechanism, and his pseudo tank capabilities. Also, the ability to change, if you so want to pursue it, his attack type with his tri slasher or tri piercer or tri fister. That sounds. Anyway, glossing over that, if you choose to change how he operates, you do have that flexibility with him. He's definitely a unit to explore, and I would be underselling him, putting him anywhere below A or B.
Right. Yeah, the only thing holding me back from the A is just looking at what we have there already, and in my head I'm like, I think he could be, but I don't know if he is. We'll remain to be seen. We'll leave it there for the moment, I guess. We have a lot more lightning here, so we'll keep moving along if that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll do Summer Kilf next. What do you guys think about Summer Kilf?
She's a B. She had her role. We had fun with her, fun in the sun, and she's been eclipsed by a bunch of other new units that came out.
Would agree with that.
Same. Great for PvE. She does have some unique skills. Frostbite can be beneficial, but it's not as reliable as I'd like it to be. So I could see her being a B.
Yeah.
Fun in the sun. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, definitely more skewed for like magic oriented things with her spirit and whatnot. So time and place, and obviously she does have enough like double hits and imperils and whatnot that does have a lot of great value. But I would agree. I think B is pretty appropriate.
And we haven't really been considering TMRs, but she does definitely have one of the most universally useful out of anybody on this whole list.
Right, right.
Good old Summer Pareo. Yep.
Yeah. For those of you watching, TMRs are exclusive to this rating. This is purely in-game performance. But yes, definitely a fun thing to note about her TMR in its exceptional use. Agreed. And then in terms of other light units here, so we do have a couple left. Warrior of Light, we can go there next if you guys want. Any thoughts on him, or no? Is he done at this point?
I think he's done at this point. That's my personal opinion.
I'd still put him in C, personally, at least.
I can see
Fair.
that. I mean, yeah. I mean,
He does have a good self heal.
that's the thing. It's a completely different kind of tank from Engelbert. Engelbert probably has just more practicality across a few different things, but there are some weaknesses that obviously Warrior of Light just does better with. But yeah, I would agree. What about Yuna? Any thoughts in particular?
Aeon Bond. Aeon Bond PTSD. That's my most immediate thought. She still has re-raise. She still has her AI when it comes to healing can be kind of wonky. That's my only real gripe with her. But she does have good flexibility in terms of having offense and defense. The only other issue I have with her is that she'll want to skew towards offense in some instances where you prefer her to hang back and be more defensive.
Well, and I think one thing also to consider with her limitations as a healer is that her Curaga is not nearly as useful as it should be because as a combination of the cast time, which will be something to, be improved upon with Valifor as soon as we get the FF10 rerun, but she will miss units and misfire Curaga all the time if you're not careful with it.
Right.
Actually, you can't be more careful. The IA picks it for you, and I can explain a little bit more about how she decides to cast the spell. So let's say someone's weakened next to her. She will cast that heal. She will target that unit and not into the ground like for something like what Velis would do. So what will end up happening is if she tries to heal a unit and that unit moves, unit will get missed. Or if unit's the only weakened unit, and she tries to heal, she'll still target that unit, and when that unit doesn't get healed at all.
Yep.
This is kind of where it's the kind of like, why did you do that? It makes no sense at all.
Wait, so she targets the panel or she targets the unit?
It's the unit.
Okay.
Yeah, seriously. You know,
She targets the unit, but she can't target herself.
So, correct.
Got it.
I have no idea why. This is why it's coded that way.
Interesting.
So
So
the fact that is she is very, very agile.
definitely. Is B appropriate, or is she more of a C then in that case?
I would still say B. She's still a good healer. But you just have to be cognizant of how you use her and what you need to do. It's kind of, we've seen setups where she has a bow tie where she doesn't move as much. Probably work a little bit better that way. If you have her without a tank, she's not going to work that well.
Oh no, definitely not. Right. The time has passed. Okay. And then go ahead. Sorry, Argalia.
No, I was going to say, if I'm not mistaken, some people ran her with green mage to give the agility boost, but that's neither here nor there. Fina, any thoughts on Fina?
Yeah, I have her here.
Well, we're
as the
doing
MR.
UR only.
Yeah, she's.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
She's the only MR on here, just because this is a dated tier list that I had her on here at one point.
She would be an honorary A tier.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Okay. I feel like I'm missing a light unit, but I don't. I think that's it. I think that's them. I mean, it's Moshri and Cecil, but I don't think they warrant the conversation. Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps up the light cast then, which brings us to the final cast of dark units. We'll start off here. The heroine herself, the MILF as we commonly know her, Black Rose Helena. Any thoughts in particular? Oh, and I'm sorry, we got a few people in chat talking about Camille. Anyone want to shut that down real quickly, or speak nice things about him?
I like his CMR. The CMR saw use for a little bit.
It did.
But for the unit, again, it's niche.
Very niche.
You can find uses for it. It's not going to be someone you want to really put on offense or defense,
Right.
unless you really get given a challenge to do so. I wouldn't see why.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. All right, we'll move on from there then. Thank you, Quistis. So yeah, Black Rose Elena. What are we thinking for her at this time in the game? I'm like hard pressed to go.
I feel like she's a really great case study of how a unit can, in some cases, go from defining a meta to being completely absent for a significant amount of time, where she hasn't, I would say, exactly been power crept in of herself, but with how the game has changed around her, there's just not a lot of place. And I feel like the impact she had now is much more one-dimensional, because you can't really expect her to heal, because at best she'll use the Calc Kira at the start of the second fight, but she dies super easy, and you basically need some special form of protection to keep her from living through one fight in the first place. And I think she highlights something that I think is a limitation of a lot of dark comps if you don't make specific counterbalances for it, which is being, what we would call a one and done, where they can completely demolish somebody in one fight, but then you're completely useless after that.
Right. Yep, definitely so.
Yep. Totally agree. If you want to put a letter to that, I would say A. For that, she will not have the resiliency for 2 hits. Once her LB is gone, she is not going to be scary. She's not going to heal that much.
Right.
She's about that resilience, that hit points. Yeah, I honestly think she's more of an LB bot for now.
Yeah. No, totally. And to the point about when you look historically and kind of study the meta of why it was, she was one of the first characters that had a really good on-demand imperil. There were a couple, but they weren't on really great units, but she definitely had at least that limit break imperil, which is a massive source of damage. Also had the spirit imperil as well, which is a little slept on. And at that time, there definitely wasn't as much equipment or espers to gear for spirit. So it was really just, she would break your spirit and just demolish you. And that same ability is a decrease AP of 20 for targets, and back then you really were reliant on like bells or bust. And I think now with the amount of ways that people can regenerate their AP or get it, that decrease in AP, although still really good, isn't as what's the word? Just demolishing as it was then. And obviously she does have, break magic barrier. She has a 100% hit chance. The arithmetician, as we mentioned, for the sub that can help heal in like a second follow-up attack. But I agree, a lot of things that made her overbearing are, I don't want to say average at this point, but the game is adjusted for it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note too that her level 25 skill, which is the sure hit, is almost made worse by the fact that it's not only just her weakest attack, but it's non-elemental, so you can't even boost it with
Right.
any of the things that are helping the rest of the dark team. And so it ends up not even being as useful as it should be.
That's right.
That said, just on this latest Dark Up map, there was actually a fight between two of the top guilds. One version ran Black Rose Helena as their third slot compared to Joker and Detective or Bleed Out the Bold. Another one ran our version, which used Lemur. The Lemur version won hands down and was much more resilient.
It wasn't even close. Yep. Literally wasn't even close. That's good. So on that point, do you want to talk about Lemur? Where do we think she lands here?
Ooh.
She is this curious case where I would say it's situational,
Yeah.
but not good enough to be on all comps, but not bad enough to be like not on this thing at all. Based on her performance, though, when she's on point, she's really on, and I, for that reason, give her a B.
Yep.
I think that's fair. I think it's fair,
I
definitely.
I think that's fair, and also I know we left Aerith off, correct?
We did.
Yeah.
Talked about her.
I would put where is she on the list?
Aerith is literally not on this list at all. We decided not to put her on. We can fix that. We can put her on.
I would put her
Yes.
in C at least.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think she's kind of similar to the Lemuras in the
Yeah.
right comp.
Yep.
She does
They both
extremely
have that time
well.
mage utility.
Yep.
That
Yeah.
too. Yep.
Nope, it's true. I mean, well, and Aerith has in my opinion, one of the best abilities in the AoE magic barrier. Like that's pretty stellar of an ability when you think about it.
So if magic were to
Yeah,
come
and she
back
has
to
that
vote-
heal that boosts your defense or your spirit, depending on if it's her limit break or the other one.
Right. Right. Yeah, I didn't want to push
So-
back too hard at the time, but yeah.
refocus if we're looking for AP. Granted, it's if it were tied to one of her heals, that'd be astounding. But it's not. But it's still there. It's still a utility that she has.
But bringing it back to Lemure, or I guess if we're trying to be proper, like I think it's Lemure, but
It is. You're right.
I think
it's
with Lemure, the really, really cool, unique thing that does necessitate bringing her all the way to 120 is that she's the only unit with an AoE haste other than Titus, which is a whole different story. But with that AoE haste, you can not only, land that with just a little careful planning on all of your units. That alone is something that even Velis can't do. And she does have the white mage sub job. So as long as you keep her far back enough or know which attack skills to turn off, she can make a pretty decent healer also.
Actually, someone brought up something in chat on the topic of Lemure that probably does warrant some discussion. So, Sir Safe, I'll address you directly. I think it's a good point. He makes the case that Ayaka he thinks is better than Lemure, but we have Ayaka at C and Lemure at B. Is that appropriate, or do you think...
I don't see any way that Ayaka is better.
Fair
But
enough.
similar,
Other than her
I would
limit
make a
break.
case for.
That and also Ayaka is in an element which is not actually one of the strongest ones until maybe later on. Velis, Ace, and other people that would be paired with him, and again, let's say Gilgamesh, Ayaka doesn't exist. She
Right.
will literally just keel over. Mir, I know it is not tanky as well, but at least she's not in an element where a sudden light is going to be a hard counter, and she'll do less and less to that.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about the difference of a B and a C, which is the bottom. So I think you could probably make a case either way, and also depending upon where you're playing in your guild wars too. Obviously, right? There's like a massive consideration there, but I feel like there's some good points there by either. Someone made the point that the double cast limit break, the full life, that can't be understated. Like that's a pretty nice get out of jail free card, but full life at this point between the cast time and some of the other things is a little little weaker than it may have been when Yuna was out with it, at that time as well. No, fair enough. I thought it was an interesting philosophical thing to go over, considering how many similarities they have with the time mates and whatnot too.
Yeah, and I feel like Twistus was saying, Lemire is very map dependent. So she could, arguably be an A or a C or below, just depending on whether you're able to make her do what she shines doing on that map.
Good point. And I think it's consistent with our rating scale so far too. Okay. All right. So we'll keep moving on here on the dark units. We'll go to let's do Dwayne next. Any thoughts on Dwayne?
Right, B.
I think B is fair. I
Going
think
into B.
I think
he
wherever
had,
Mond
he had
is,
fun before.
yeah.
It's good because he has the hate to mess with maps, and tanky enough, but I don't think we've seen him a lot in the current. Or I don't know if many people have even tested him very much in the current dark because of just how much damage everyone else does compared to him.
Right.
I mean, we've seen guilds that tried to pair him with Leader the Bold or Joker, or maybe even all three. Our testing, Dwayne just wasn't that piece that we needed compared to Joker and Leader the Bold.
I'll be honest. I would almost even make the case that he's a C. I really don't even know if he's that good, considering he can't generate hate at all. It's literally the 5 and then it's gone. Exploitable with no protector shell, AoE resistance, unit resistance at all. He's basically a glorified DPS, to some degree. Yeah. He's still got some things utility-wise, the slash resistance down, the dark imperil, the disable access. There's a lot of really great things in his kit. I just have yet to see any of them actually work very consistently. So I don't know if I'll leave him at B for now, but we can still play with it.
Nope, B or C is fine. I mean, again, he's been outshined. And, until maybe, let's say, a new MA.
He faced a lot of the same transitional changes as what we were saying about Helena, where at the time he did all these things that were much more unique, whereas now, with the way other things have caught up, he just doesn't have the same survivability or utility that you would want to get from somebody in your team like that.
Right. No, totally. All right. And I keep seeing some comments here on that topic, so don't mind me, and please shut me up if you don't want to talk about it anymore. Can I bring up one more point about the Ayaka thing? I think this.
No, please.
Go ahead.
This is actually some of the most fun that I wanted to, obviously the opportunity for us in a roundtable discussion to talk about. Ayaka, more likely to be in a rainbow comp than Lemire? Thoughts?
Of course.
Yeah.
Is that enough, you think, to bump her up to a B with the other rest of the cast there, or no?
No, because she's all for nothing else.
Yeah, I think that by and large would be true. I will say, though, that it then can still really greatly depend on, is Hestasia going to be the deciding factor as to whether those other two units are going to be able to powerhouse that other team or not.
Good point. Nope, fair enough.
We had to pick a rainbow healer that was off comp to do what Ayaka does. I would pick Resnick 11 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
Good point, too. Okay, fair enough. Nope, this is the opportunity to talk about it. Thought it was an interesting talking point, and wanted to be able to at least cover it adequately. So, all right, we'll drop that. She'll be as dead as Skahal. Move on. So more dark units here. We got a couple left, and then we can kind of reevaluate the tier list at a high level. Golbez on the list, yes or no?
It pains me.
Yeah.
He's on the list.
He's not.
Wait, Quistis said on the list, and Argalia, you said not? Oh, not on the list. I would agree. It's so fringe. I agree. He's got so many great imperils, but he's so slow. The cast time is a rough thing to get around.
Slow.
Yeah. The durability is
his passive also jacked up. It's supposed to be 3 turns. It actually only lasts 2.
That's right.
But it basically during the fight, it's already gone.
That's right. It counts his first turn when the fight starts as one of the turns of the passive, so just you don't get as much benefit out of it.
No.
Agreed. Okay, so that. What about Joker next? What do we think about Joker?
I like Maness.
I'd put him in A.
Oh, yeah. I would
Nope.
go A.
I'd go A.
I would go A. Again, we just judge the units on the map they're strong in. Everyone's call probably gonna be S or SS. It's just gonna be like that. I think later on, and we have seen some limitations to him and his comp enables. He will do damage. I will be hard pressed to find that on every map I could run him versus Astrius and expect to win. That's not going to happen. We do rated
Yeah, and I
Astrius
think it's
SS
worth
values.
noting too that up until this point, we had Joker for at least several weeks, and it wasn't until people had their Leelas ready that we saw any good Joker teams.
Yep. Well, and to me, I've always figured Joker's biggest thing is really just the protect buff. If he didn't have that ability, I don't think he'd be used at all. Like, I know he's got some decent survivability compared to some of the other units, but Aegion obviously has some good damage in that it's typeless. Some unique things about maybe some of his abilities, but without that protect, yeah, I think it's a tough sell. I'll be honest, I would almost be inclined to put Joker at B. Like if Dark Leela didn't exist right now, like I don't think you'd be running Joker.
I think we rent Dark either, so
That's good. That's also a good
Yeah,
point.
that's a very
Right, but you don't even.
Some of the benefits.
Go ahead.
So yeah, some of the benefits. I mean, he does have the large AOE with the decrease attack and magic, which can hit pretty well. And his one shot, one kill spell, at least on paper, right, without chaining, it's a 200% hit.
Yeah.
Ignores reflex and counter and defense break on the start.
Good
So
point.
I think we see those skills hurt because of the damage that you've already taken, or they're just timed so perfect because his agility is so high that it's like that second one to hit, and then he finishes off. And I think that's his. So I think A about really good, but has exploitable flaws is kind of.
Yeah.
Use a sports metaphor for basketball. We're in the NBA Finals. He, to me, is like Klay Thompson. He is not going to carry your team, but if you put him next to Steph Curry, he will give you threes. He will put points up on the board.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. Well, and that's the thing. It's hard to differentiate. Are we talking about them and their synergy with the team or them individually? I actually would take back my opinion. I actually do think A is probably adequate. But I don't think I'd go much higher than A. Obviously, a lot of utility, but I don't think he carries, like you mentioned, the same way that some of the S tier people do.
Yeah, and to
Correct.
nerdify the analogy that Christus had been saying is I had been jokingly referring to him as like the Dark 9S in that he's the support player. He's really setting up, at least your actual MVP to do what they need to do.
Right.
And so in that sense too, I feel like he's really supplementing as his highlight. And he does have unique utility, and unlike 9S, he can actually do damage. But like his level 25 skill is typeless, and then he has all those other debuffs that you guys were mentioning. So I think A definitely fits.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Okay, some of the other dark units here. Kane, is he still usable nowadays, or is he fallen off entirely?
He has
I think
good
his
abilities.
main
Tried to
problem
make
is he
him work.
dies too easy. I think he has a lot of great things in theory, but he just dies so fast.
I would agree. There's many instances where I just don't see him living past one hit. He has the courage proc, but
as well, too, yeah.
right, yeah.
Still,
All
just
right,
when you have a heal, they'll top him off. Yeah, I think it's either C or nothing at all.
or nothing. I would agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a hard place to put him in the C with what we have there currently. Okay, pending
I
any
know
other
people
thoughts.
have brought up
Mhm.
because talked about Aradea. He does have courage removal and the decrease healing power, but I think the issue with that is it is a cast time.
Yep.
And you have that to worry about. So
Good wrinkle in it, absolutely.
And it's not like O'Brien's where it's tracking either, unfortunately.
Right.
yeah,
Well, if he doesn't have that, not everyone runs tracking Oberon, but
Right.
he doesn't have
Yeah,
that
if you-
ability.
Fair enough. All right, what do we think about Knight of Ruin Stern then? Is he on this list?
I can't
I'd say
wait for
yes,
that.
and he'll even his master ability too when he gets basically a mirage per battle, it will elevate him even higher. From what we've seen and how we've seen him used with, let's say, Leader of the Bolt, I think B would be fair. I think when he gets buffed again, because he really doesn't have his MA at all, which gives a dark affinity, he doesn't deserve an A, but I think once he does, he will be an A for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just
Yeah,
has so much raw power.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And there is
Yeah.
utility too. There's defense break. There's healing power down. You know.
I mean, sometimes that's enough where he just hits your team with a hazard render, and it either, if it doesn't ruin your team, it might ruin your next swing if it's your first swing in Guild War. So it's always dangerous to go up against him.
Totally. Okay, I think that's fair. Is B appropriate for him then, or do you think he's higher or lower?
No, I think he has too many
I'd say B,
weaknesses
yeah.
personally.
As of right now, B, yeah.
Yeah,
MA2 would change that.
fair. And then a couple last few dark ones here. Prompto, is he on the list? Yes or no?
I'd put him in B.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I would say
Dispel
more
Spread.
C. I've seen him
Yeah.
used. I've seen him used, but again, he is very, very fragile. Again,
Yeah,
Dark
yeah.
is not short on damage units. Would you really? And for me, again, I hate to compare between units, but I have to because there's only 3 slots. But so it may influence a little bit on his kill alone. I still think it's closer than C than a B. Again, just the spell spread won't do it. I just don't think that's enough for him as one of the units. Where
Right.
someone else can either bring either more damage or more utility.
Right. No, totally. Yeah, and so some people, exactly. Dispel Spread, although we've hyped it up in a couple other characters, Prompto's overall survivability is just simply non-existent. And again, Lex, I agree, class match probably good, but this is Guild Wars specifically. He's good, just not great, and very unique in terms of being able to get the job done. The status effect side of him, which I thought is his real upside, I've yet to actually see be realized. I don't. If he was status affecting left and right, I'd probably want to rank him higher, but I just don't see that being strong.
Really good point, and I'm glad you bring that up because that's exactly what would have initially put him in that B tier in my mind. But as you had said, and like Christus was inferring as well, in actual battle, you don't typically see him do much more than spam Dispel Spread,
Right.
and then die if he doesn't, if anybody gets too close.
Right. He's very flimsy. One of the worst survivability in the game for a DPS. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, and then I think Venera. What do we think about Venera here?
I like her, just not in this time. Maybe even with her MA2, I don't think she's got enough out of it. Meta shifted a little bit where she was the most evasive character. That's just not going to matter or concern anymore compared to Stella and Elena. It's not a comparison.
We thinking B or C then, from that perspective?
I'd be inclined to say so if we had to put her on the list.
I would say
It's a hard C for me.
I would say
it's a
C.
hard place for C.
Yeah, she doesn't do much that's really special in my opinion anymore. It's really just high agility, high evasion, and then some slash and some missile. But again, I'm trying to find. Here we go. So like some of her skills in terms of utility, defense break, but that's everywhere, so it's not really like unique to her. Does restore some of the damage done. That's fine. Does have the restore AP and single target resistance, but on Blood Pack. But we've seen that be turned off for like the proper AI tuning. Actually, to Drace, your point earlier, she's one of the few units that does not have a teammate buff. So when you are on that, move 4, she's one of those characters that will get into trouble. So definitely some demerits there in the modern state of the game.
And with the trust stones, the ability to get more accurate across the board makes her evasion a little less valuable.
Right. So little
One other point with Prompto too that I feel like is worth considering, just as a general mindset with any of this too, is that Prompto, for example, when we were saying that he has all these really great status ailments and things in his kit that look great, but you don't typically see him use them. has to do with the fact that you have to always consider how the AI wants to deal damage, which is always delivering the most damage to as many units as it can. So if a unit has something like Dispel Spread, which is pretty much his only AoE attack whatsoever, it's going to want to use that as much as possible. So it doesn't really matter so much. Like, unless you turn that off, like, great, awesome. He could poison somebody, he could slow them, he could lower their dark res. That's all great. But if he's never going to use those attacks until after he blows 3 AoEs and all of his AP, how much good is that really going to do you?
Right. Nope, totally agreed. Totally agreed. And it stinks because I actually think status elements are a really creative way to try to beat certain comps. I just don't see it in practice that often. All right, and then last but not least, Little Leela the Bold, Dark Leela. What do we think about her? I would imagine S or even maybe SS.
Yeah, I would put her in S tier.
Is SS a consideration or is that too high?
I feel like that might.
I don't think she's universal enough.
Yeah.
Or meta defining enough.
Like maybe at most S plus, but that's not on this list. So I feel like S would be a proper placement for her. She definitely has the courage, the whole. Even if it doesn't seem like a lot, being able to heal back from not being near death, on top of having courage,
Yeah.
on top of her tank ability, pretty good.
Yeah.
And of course,
I'm almost tempted to change my mind and say SS tier.
I'm close to it.
Of something that we brought up as huge things to, like I'm leaning towards SS tier just because she does not only have that huge AoE, but that huge AoE dispels,
right?
Which is massive because you're immediately turning off, the tank. For any tank that you're going against that doesn't have innate hate, they're going to immediately be useless. And then on top of that, you have the fact that not only does she have courage on her main job, but she has it, as a buff that she'll readily use. And that also introduces a whole new mechanic that we won't see again until Snow, which is where even if she doesn't hit that 1 HP to trigger courage, it's going to heal back a huge chunk of her HP that you can boost even further through healing power buffs.
Right.
Yep.
And then on top of that, while that courage is on, she gets an additional AoE res.
20
so I just think in those senses, I would say she almost warrants an SS tier, even if she doesn't necessarily do certain things better than those other SS tier units. I think she deserves that status. And, we've even seen, like just like we were saying with Joker, when people had Joker ready, we didn't see a whole bunch of dark teams suddenly show back up. But as soon as Leela was around, that's when it started happening.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Her debuff also removes haste.
I was just gonna say that. I'm like, if Velas is on the SS tier for the haste removal has to be part of the equation too. That when you come at her with the haste mechanic in mind, the fact that you can just nullify that, I think, is massive, considering how much we hype up Velas. That if you can take away that part of his benefit and Lemure's benefit, where we talk about her with Hastaja, or however you want to pronounce it, that's big.
And her courage is 2 casts also.
Yep. And dare we not even forget to mention her level 25 or 125 ability here, I actually think is pretty awesome. It's a protect dispel and decrease healing power of 70. That's the most decreased healing power in the game currently. And again, if you're talking about Velas, that's a great counter to it. Obviously, helps against someone like even maybe Charlotte with how much she regens, what it would do for the pocket that Resnick gives her. Oh, did we put Resnick on here? No, we did. I'm sorry. And then finally, the limit break of Leela is kind of like sneaky good. Obviously, the slash resistance power of 38%, but the blind is actually really nice for her evasion and Joker's evasion too. So, like, I don't know. I feel like that's enough justification for the SS ranking.
Yeah, that blind is really key, like you said too. So yeah, definitely.
Considering especially people, it's a good evasion accuracy check. A lot of people have moved away from aim runes and have more so leaned towards into the other rune sets. So if you stack enough evasion, if you care enough to, then people will get checked on that and they'll end up missing on her, especially in conjunction with the blind from LB.
Right. Okay. All right. So with that, regular Stern, is he on this list at all?
No.
Just making sure I was thorough about all the potential.
Maybe half King Stern whenever he arrives or whatever.
Oh, and thank you, Lorix man. Great point here too. Again, sorry everyone. This is one that I was maintaining. Garvall, I do not have on here. Is Garvall C tier or higher?
I like him at B.
Probably Argyle. You used him. What do you think?
Um, I use him for just a little bit. Didn't use him too often because I mean there are clearly better options than Extreme Strategy Garble. He definitely has his bonuses. His chi barrier being a great physical reduction, especially with the EX upgrade to it. Um, I would put him at B, having access to missile, being an energist in general. I have a penchant for energists more. Solir, they're amazing class types in my opinion. So I would put him at B. He's not amazing, but in the right setup, right comp, I can see him having great play. Maybe if you want to bring back Black Rose, Helena, and Garble in the same comp, then by all means go for it. But
Mhm.
he's a one-hit wonder by far. You can 6-star with him, but it's not as reliable as other dark compositions, and it's also dependent on what you're fighting as well. So he's fringe. I wouldn't put him at C by any stretch, but I feel like B is a safe place to put him
I
as
think
of
it's
right
fair.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say B seems fair. And one of the main problems that I know Q and I have talked about is the fact that he doesn't have any built-in spirit penetration really to speak of. And so, you have tanks like Charlotte or Celeste around, and it's going to mitigate just a huge amount of his damage. And so he does have those major limitations, but I think it's really interesting too that we have not seen any single unit thus far have Energist as a sub job. So they do inhabit this really unique space. Like the closest we've come to an equivalent to that, besides himself in Salir, is Terra, like we were
Right.
saying.
Right.
So I think they can be little powerhouses, but you have to be really specific in the targets you choose, which is why a unit like him can work well on an offensive team, but you would never wall it.
Right.
Never, ever. I would never think of walling Garble. And if I ever bring up that subject, please kick me from the guild. That being said, yeah, no, Garble on offense has a place. He can absolutely blow up people who want to attempt to run evade. Um, I want to do more mocking with him, but it's almost at the point where it doesn't feel quite worth it and feels more like a pet project akin to what I'd like to do with the Irma.
Right.
But yeah, he sees more immediate results than Irma does as of right now for me.
All right. Okay. All right. That works. So real quick then, I don't know how many of you in our Discord chat have the stream up to see what I'm showing on the screen currently. But
Yep.
if you can, so what we have here at the bottom list in terms of in the white area are those that we think are less than C and effectively, um, not that they're unusable, but like they're going to get beat by majority of everything. Is there any character here that you think we missed and should be at least a C, or that we just forgot somehow and isn't on it at all?
Really wish Miranda was a C. I will just say that and be done with it. How do you guys feel about Lastwell?
That he's one of the
Is
only
he?
few, yeah, that sticks out to me.
Yeah, Lastwell. I kind of want to speak to him just a tiny bit. Having Raj is great, but I'm not sure about what his placement in global is as of right now.
I could see C. I mean, not only is it Mirage, he's got the Ice Imperil, he's got double hits, he's got the Dragoon sub job. Technically, that's another source of valuable
Yeah,
damage. Um,
and also buff.
yeah. Again, he's kind of that product of the ice element being weak, so you just the visibility and testing isn't necessarily all there. But if we're looking at again the comparisons of who's in the C tier, I think it's hard to make a case that he doesn't belong to be alongside them.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I think he has really phenomenal accuracy, but the problem is that he's built like an evade unit, but
mhm.
he can't actually evade.
Yes and no. So he's of that B tier. Like he's Joker's evasion. Like, can they evade in a non-evasion meta when you gear them for it? The answer is definitely
That's
yes,
true.
but it's not a reliable source of like
Mhm.
actually classifying them as an evade unit. It's more their effective HP that they're gonna miss a dodge hit every once in a while, so they'll survive a little longer. But I agree, the evasion is definitely a demerit when you consider the survivability.
But that is a really good point, given that, when we got his X and everything, we were still very deep in that meta,
Right.
and we're not in that same place anymore.
Right. Right. If Leela can evade a hit, he can evade a hit. That's kind of what it is. She might be a couple percentage points higher, but it's not very far off. Um,
Any thoughts on Rob at all? Nothing. No.
Nothing. Not for Guild
Nothing.
War.
Yeah.
Not since the first month or two.
Yeah.
He jumped up early on, and then once all the other new units came up, just same thing with Elda and a lot of the other original EX units.
Shout out to TMR.
Right. And I think that's it. I mean, if I had to really make a stretch case here, I could see an instance where maybe Renan is a C, but I don't feel bad leaving him off. Other
I
characters.
mean, Laswell,
Yes.
it's like a wet noodle. So if Laswell's on there, then I could see, Renan. Because I mean, look at Laswell's MA2. They gave him 40 slash resistance penetration. They gave him AP when critical hitting, as well as the ice attack buff. I mean, they really jumped him up to
Right.
try to compete.
Well,
And every time I've tried to use him in
Yeah.
ice, kind of.
actually, wait a minute. I'm gonna actually put Renan C if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just looked at his page here, and I loved the character reviews for this guy because I actually thought it was really interesting. There's a lot of really good stuff here. I know the AI can be a little bit wonky when we were talking about balancing devout and whatnot, but going down the list here, you get a 25% magic in peril. His Domain of Lightning buff here is the 35 spirit for allies in a square, alongside 20% missile resistance. He's got the general barriers we talked about. His ball lightning is a general barrier break, so both physical and magic, as well as 100% counter reduction chance. He's also got Dispel Courage. It's an AoE. It's not a single target, so AoE Dispel Courage. And then technically on the sub job, he's got Dispel, Protect, and Shell. Again, and it's double hit. So the AI usage of this is really what made us keep him off the list. That the AI isn't terribly reliable, but my goodness, when you actually look at the kit here, I kind of remember why I was so excited for him when he came out.
I want to refund.
Yeah, I think when I try to use him a lot, I used him in Arena for a couple weeks, as well as try to use him in Guild War. And I think a lot of our problems were trying to shove him into that support role with Devout.
Right.
And you really had to run him as a DPS. And I think I ran him as Kodadama for a bit because Light Evade was still really high, and his accuracy, I couldn't get him to hit anything.
Right.
So I mean, as a DP, as a damage dealer, he's I would say as good as Laswell. I mean, if you're looking at that tier list, but I wouldn't. Put him
Yeah, I feel like
right
that's
over
fair.
Ern.
Right. It's true. Well,
Yeah.
and now if I look at this current list that we have here as exceptions, I can't remember the last time I saw anyone run these in top 10. I mean, maybe a couple here and there niche, but I think we put everyone on that we should have.
Yeah, and I would
Leela's
actually go back and I would bump Terra up to S tier.
Okay, and this is the time to do that. So that was my next question I was going to ask. Now we start going through and comparing the tiers. Anybody too high, too low, or in the right spot? So Drace is making a motion to bump Terra up to S. Anyone have any specific thoughts here now that we can see our S tier and our A tier?
I would like to second that notion, mainly because of a Meltdown, Sentinel Courage. She's got great utility, and she's basically, as aforementioned, an Energist in disguise because of Meltdown.
I don't disagree with that.
One thing I do want to point out, Will, you didn't put Detective Leela on the list.
What? She's right there.
Yeah, what?
On the top.
She's my SS.
I'm blind. I
All
don't see
right.
it. That's weird. Whatever.
Open your eyes.
No worries, no worries.
No
That would have been an egregious miss, so thank you for bringing that up. If I ended stream and we didn't have her on here, that would have been a problem. So
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, so we'll go through here. So hard to debate to see whether they should be higher and lower. I think that's fair. I have a couple people in chat saying that King Mont should be higher than B. I'm pretty confident that he probably shouldn't, though. You guys agree or disagree with that?
He should not be higher than B.
Yeah, I think he's missing too many things as a tank.
Yep.
He didn't age well. When he first came out, I would be inclined to agree that he should be higher than
Oh
B,
yeah,
but
King Mont revolutionized the tank role when he came out. Absolutely. I agree. I think he's
Yeah.
fine at B. And
So,
even-
like, your ranking criteria, I think he has too many exploitable weaknesses.
Yep.
Right, and those of you, just in case you joined late, this was our overall ranking criteria from SS to C. The concept behind B is that they're good. They just won't get you very far. I think that's adequate in terms of talk about Mont. He's fine. He's just not going to get you very far. And then the A tier is really good but exploitable flaws. That's kind of a big caveat there as well because I see the next topic here I was going to bring back Cloud. A lot of people want to see Cloud in S, but I do agree there's a lot of exploitable flaws from a durability standpoint. I think A is probably okay, but I know instinctively S feels right. Anyone else have any strong thoughts on that?
Again, biased. I wanted to
Well,
put
and I
him.
think to reinforce your point, Will, is the fact that, by that criteria, Mont, if he's going to be good anywhere, it's pretty much only going to be in a fire comp. And by that measure, that's simply not going to
It's not going to work.
get you anywhere near as far, as those other options. And, with that in mind, I think with, what he brings to the table, there's just no reason, there's a reason why we haven't seen any firewalls.
No. Some people thinking that Gilgamesh might be too high at S. Now that we kind of evaluate that, and actually, speaking frankly, I'm a little surprised the S has more characters than the A. Anyone else who want to evaluate here in terms of between S and A? Because I think those are probably the next few that might wiggle back and forth. Or are we thinking this is pretty adequate or accurate?
I mean, looking at the types of units, I think it'll be hard to move up and down. I know Q is really high on Gilgamesh. He could make argument possibly. Resnick is again lightning only comp. You can't throw them. Throw it together. I mean, but again, she's super strong and really elevated those.
Actually, can I press Q on something too, if you don't mind? I'm sorry to Nurgin, I'm getting a bunch of comments here.
No, go.
If we're holding Cloud to the standard that he's exploitable but really good, would that not also apply to Gilgamesh when we're talking about his durability?
Yeah.
And even like the slash resistance in peril, it's not as that they used to insta kill people, and that obviously isn't really the case anymore either. Is that still? Do you have a strong feeling, Quistis, putting you on the spot here? Oh, did Q leave?
I think he had to drop.
Oh, he had to drop.
All right, he might have had to drop, but I feel like that's fair. I would put Gilgamesh in A tier.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're.
And I think what keeps Resnick in the S tier, is that she obviously thrives under a mono lightning setup, but you can use a lot of her buffs in a rainbow comp type versatility. So.
Right. Just to that point, she is one of the few healers that does have the. Oh goodness. Oh, maybe not. I could have sworn she had innate. Oh, she does on her mastery. Increased healing power for what it's worth innately compared to some of the others. It's not all arithmetician based, which some of those healers don't get full value if their height is not correct. But to your point of the rainbow comp, this teaching of the strongbolt, sure, you miss out on the lightning attack of third eye for an ally, but that person still gets debuff resistance of 30 and unit resistance of 25, and the insta heals still apply to any character, not just lightning. So when you use Law of Invigoration there, it's the insta heal of 210 and the agility attack and magic buffs, in addition to Law of Refuge, which has reduced the physical damage of 50% for 3 times. So to your point, she definitely is rainbow worthy. It's just that she's obviously optimized in lightning.
So now that I think about it, right, the last comp that I was playing with lightning with Esther, she would use the Leela TMR off to the side because it has such a wide range, and then she would buff the tank and drop her hate, and then typically that was engage time, and then she would just start healing. So really, it would be the same exact opener, and really no difference in a rainbow comp other than just cards and stats. But I think her same usefulness in terms of skills and abilities would be there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting too that you have the really great ability to change how she works simply by changing her sub job. Because if you have her on Calc AI, she's going to behave and actually have different buffing priority than if she's on, say, Devout or Thief.
And then last pushback I'm getting here, sorry, just kind of segueing as we wrap things up here. Um, People also pushing back a little bit on Aranea, thinking she's too squishy overall to be in that S tier. And
Uh,
I don't,
Nerd
I
and
don't
I
know
were
about
actually talking about
I,
this,
I don't,
and
yeah, I
I
don't fully
feel like
disagree.
I feel like she is a lot tankier than people are necessarily giving her credit for because of the transition to the meta that we had gone over, where in the past, when you needed your DPS to make sure that they were hitting Elena and Locke, and anything evade related that way, you were sacrificing a ton of survivability. And so, yeah, it is true that she is, more vulnerable to magic than she is physical. I think that especially, when you consider that you don't have to be stacking like 130 plus accuracy anymore, you can really lean back more into her bruiser side of things.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
when I was wind hunting, especially the second fight, right? You can get her to buff, especially like people are talking about, controlling her AI. Sometimes she uses the job 25 skill multiple times in the fight. And on the first fight, I think that's okay because she stands back. Let's say she heals. I use like Joom and Velis, right? So she'll go and buff and then buff again. So she'll use both the buffs, but she'll stay back, and then Velis will probably heal Joom to give her even more AP, and then she'll go nuts on it. And then the second fight, I can't remember what the map was, but there was like the stairs off to the right that they would climb. And because she would use bells, and then the second fight, she would use some of her pugilist, one of the abilities. I regularly saw her up over 10k hit points. So, and with all the defense that she was stacking and everything, it's just I wasn't having her get one shot. And then with Velis healing the tank, she was regularly in that heal zone
Right.
where she was lasting, multiple fights,
Mhm.
pretty easily.
Yeah. No, totally. Her kit. It's true. And you know what? I actually will bring this up for commenters just to see it once again. I don't have a strong opinion for her remaining S. I'm not unconvinced that she shouldn't be, though. I think you guys made a really good case for it. That when you look at the pure damage being done, and just circling back to the durability side of things, number one, she does have an immense amount of effective HP overall. She does have a very high health pool. A lot of great innate defense and ways to boost the defense. Obviously, the spirit side of things is where it's lacking, where she has that minus 10% to magic and no spirits. So, to Drace's point, when we were in a certain kind of meta, you couldn't gear her for those weaknesses. But now, not only can you gear her for those weaknesses, but you now have Velis in the mix who can kind of compensate a little bit for taking maybe a little extra damage than she's comfortable with. But when you look at the kit overall, not only is it a variety of both strike and pierce type damage, which have some immense upside given the potential modifiers you can put her for ice attack. Like if you put the ice lance on her, these strike attack damages are going to get the ice attack up because of that. But you have the 100% hit chance. You have the Dragoon Dive, obviously has the defense and attack buff. She has Dispel buffs and haste, which, as we were just talking about with Leela, obviously not the same AoE, but the ability itself is just fantastic. And it's also Courage Dispel. She's got decreased agility, decreased single target resistance. Like the list goes on and on and on. That of the abilities and utilities she has. So I do think there is that case to be made for an S. We just haven't seen the game be in a place where everyone can witness it firsthand. I don't know if that's fair to say.
Yeah, and then pugilist,
Yeah, I would
Oh,
like
agree
and
with
the
that.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, the
people
Puget
is like
subject completely.
yeah.
Yeah,
So look at the buff there, the Iron Body stance. That's
Yeah,
20%
she can self
HP,
heal.
not based on magic. Yeah, she
yep,
she gets
it
really
I think is
really high
huge.
up even before Velis. When I was having to run her with like Fry and Rosa, or Fry and Aerith when
right.
we had a lot of light, she was able to heal herself if the healer went down. The next hit, the second turn, she would heal up and then have that 15 defense buff on top of it.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah, and if you look at her LB, I think the range height is something ridiculous outside of it having a
Yeah,
big square
three.
like that also.
That's bad.
Yeah,
43
it's
is
a range
very
3. Yeah.
43 is very cheap for an ability like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and 40 defense pen on it, and she loves using it. So right off the top, 40 defense penetration from that, and then 40 more from her
Passive
um
right here.
yeah, passive. So even if she burns her buff, um, which gives another 30, right? If she uses that, she's 100%. If she uses aerial supremacy and then like jumps on Engelbert,
Yep.
he has no defense.
Yep. Well, even regardless of aerial supremacy, if you just had the Trust Dome passives on either the attack set or just
Yeah.
a Trust Dome passive of 10 defense pen, you're talking 90 defense penetration on the limit break. So that's a huge cleave to the tank. Oh,
Yeah.
did I? Oh my god. I closed out. Hopefully it saved it. Hold on a second. I think it saved it. Please. Oh, thank goodness. I got it.
Okay.
We're good, guys.
We can always look back at the recording.
Yeah.
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 Rewind it.
Right. Okay. So I think we kind of covered the potentials. Any last motions for certain people to be higher or lower here?
I'm pretty
I
good
wish
where things are, I
Barrett and
think.
Whisper existed.
I wish
But
Whisper and
otherwise-
Barrett were real characters. I wonder who typed that.
Who knows?
Dude, seriously,
Who knows,
if Whisper just needs more debuff resistance, that's it. The debuffs, there's too much penetration in the game currently that her resistances are effectively useless. She just needs more. Or they need to finally power creep her to keep up with the HP levels, like one or the other. It's just not usable.
Yeah, I mean the MA2 is 100% all attack type resistance and innate hate.
Right.
So
Well, I don't even think that's enough. I still think you need like element debuff
Yeah.
resistance because there's the fact that there's penetration alone. Like when she first came out, the fact that most DPS have 40% penetration of certain kind of attack types just makes her incredibly weak.
yeah,
You know, you go 100% slash resistance and it's really 60% to an attacker. She's gonna die. But okay, all right. On that note, given no objections, I don't see any more murmuring in chat. So Eris brings a good point. Thancred and Sakura, both units I left off this list, unfortunately, just because I forgot to update them when they got their MA2s. Thancred, definitely not on this list. I can like spare you all the time and loss of brain cells. Unfortunately, dude has just never made it. He's way too slow. It's not even competitive. Sakura, though, you guys have any strong thoughts? Or did I, if I missed something on Thancred that you want to battle me back on, go right ahead?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
He's an arena character.
Yeah.
That's it. Sakura, I have not had the chance to play with her, but she does intrigue me, especially with the upcoming limited guild battles. I'll say as much.
Totally. She
But
seems.
I
She's yeah.
don't have the highest of hopes, but I do want to play with her.
Totally. Someone clip that last 10 seconds for us. Thank you. Sorry.
I think you will. Please,
uh, no. Cost limited stuff. She is like stellar. I won't disagree with that. I think she's one of the best units. But regular Guild War, really, really tough to get her to fit in.
we walled her once.
Yeah.
It was
didn't
not good.
Didn't go well.
So I heard.
No,
Yep. So.
Fair nod, TM.
it's on the wall Hall of Shame.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, on that note, this has gone on for a fairly long time. So for those of you watching, hopefully this is entertaining, and all of you guys here in Discord chat with me, really appreciate everyone being here for the first, hopefully of many podcast style things. Really made it a lot easier for me to rely on your expertise, and I'm sure the viewers got a lot out of it as well. But on a note, I'll leave the floor open for anyone else that wants to make any final comments or anything. Go right ahead.
No, I thought this was great. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, I keep seeing talk about Kane.
Yeah.
And I'll have to say he's one of my favorite all-time, Final Fantasy characters. I loved it when he came out. I used him all the time when he was first released. I love Aranea. He just seems to be just, whether it's power creep, whether it's how his abilities are, I really wish I could throw him up, super high on that list, but I can't.
It just makes you want to throw up. You can just say it. We know.
Yep. No, it's true. He was one of the first meta-defining characters, other than Sid. Like it was Sid and then Kane.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, on all the testing I've done with Kane, the dude just evaporates at the first sign of damage. It's just, I know he has courage, so maybe he'll live for a second attack, but like
it's just not enough.
You just can't rely on that and Guild War.
Yeah, maybe that map. So if you remember that map where we had, I know Agrius loved, so it was where everyone who didn't have a high jump would go along the bottom. It was a snow map, and then all like Nivlu or Kane would jump up over the top and hop across, and he was great at that, because Agrius would just confuse everybody walking across, and then Kane would flank and hop across the map and then go hit people from the side. But I don't think we've even seen a map like that to really take advantage.
Well, and
Makes sense.
if I may, even that aside, you're right. That's exactly a big part. He was one of the few characters that had the mobility, but at that time, there literally did not exist in the game any kind of pierce resistance. This was pre Leviathan, pre the Burgeon Helm, pre any espers that like it really was not around. So there was not only the threat of him imperiling you for pierce, but like you literally just couldn't even resist it. There was no unit resistance or air. I mean, Odin and Death Machine existed, but like not like today's standards. The game definitely has come a long way where just that regular pierce attack doesn't hit the way it did then.
Yeah, and I think Nurgent really brought up a really great point when we were talking earlier, which is that, he was actually testing Agrias, to see just, for fun, right? Like, how does she do right now? And we all know Agrias, or anybody who's been playing for long enough remembers just how incapacitating her status ailments are.
Right.
And so, I think it's important to not just be looking at the raw numbers when you're looking at somebody's kit, and not just be thinking about like to everything we had been saying with every single one of these units so far in terms of, oh, what can they do, but also what can't they do? And so when you're putting together a comp and taking these units that have all these really great individual merits, you have to think about, not just are they the same element and what, espers and vision cards are they going to use together, but then you also have to consider just again on that utility side of things, what blind spots am I giving myself? Am I not giving myself any sort of, debuff resistance, or am I, leaning all in on status elements? You have to really try to think about just on almost a mechanical level, what am I doing that the enemy A can't prepare for, but B isn't necessarily going to be prepared to stop, and in terms of what I'm going to be running this team against, what am I probably going to run into, and how is this going to do against that?
Right. It's true. It's true. It's definitely that next level thought that helps theory craft the characters to life in practical usage. Okay, well, good. That's a good note to end on. Everyone that stuck around and watched, really appreciate you being here as well. The comments drove a lot of really extra great discussion, some really valid points that hopefully we can, took into account. I know there's probably some people that vehemently disagree with some of the rankings still. I know Cloud appears to be the big debate piece here, but regardless, I hope you took something out of this and look forward to doing more content like this. I'm sure I'll do a video kind of summarizing the tier list for those of you watching this video late as well. But on that note, enjoy the rest of your night. Good luck pulling for Valentine Eldyra if you choose to do so, and suffer with the results like myself and Drace probably will, and beating our heads against the wall and making her work. But
Won't be alone.
yeah, that's
It is known.
one can only hope. One can only hope for that GL exclusive fire unit that suddenly is the light bulb.
Reagan.
Right, dude. I would love Reagan. Reagan or Roberta, please. My goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll stop rambling here. We'll end here. So.
But thank you so much for having us, Will. It's
Thanks,
been a
Will.
pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you guys. We'll talk to everybody soon.